Okay, welcome to the Southeastern Regional Advisory Council meeting. This meeting's held in person at the John Wesley Powell Museum in Green River. It's also being streamed live on YouTube. This public forum allows us to express our opinions and ideas on wildlife management in our state. This RAC considers the feedback and proposals before us today and reports them to the Wildlife Board. The Wildlife Board, not the RAC, is charged with setting wildlife policy for the state. Wildlife management is complex and sometimes gets emotionally charged. We all have ideas and opinions about what's best for Utah's wildlife. That's why we're here today. That's a good thing. We encourage those who want to express their opinion today to fill out a comment card for the agenda item that they wish to speak to. Bring it up here to the front. We expect those in attendance to respect the people who speak, especially those who hold views that don't align with our own. Respectful behavior helps facilitate efficient meetings where RAC members can listen, digest, and address the concerns, ideas, and proposals being presented for consideration. Disrespectful behavior includes booing, yelling, cheering, laughing while someone's speaking. Please help maintain a respectful space by referring to people by name instead of deceptors of their physical characteristics, demeanor, or gender. If this behavior occurs, I will ask and remind attendees to be respectful. If the behavior continues, those individuals will be asked to leave the meeting. Lastly, please help reduce distractions during the meeting by putting your phone on silent. If you need to take a call, we ask you step out in the foyer to do so. With that, just speak real quick here to the process. We will first give the presenters time to make any clarifications that they want. We'll open it up to questions from the RAC board. We'll then go to questions from the audience. If you have a question, please step up to the mic, state your name, and then proceed with your question. After that, we'll have DJ give us our online comments. Following that, we'll take comments from the audience as long as there's a comment card turned in, and then we'll have RAC discussion and entertain motions for each agenda item. Because of the very long agenda list tonight, we're going to forego the regional update. I will give just a very brief update on January's RAC meeting. The waterfowl recommendations were approved as presented. The falconry reporting requirements were approved as presented. They approved adding 3 multi-season tags to the cache. That was on the black bear, regarding the black bear. There was a motion to allow multi-season permit holders to hunt during the spot and stock season if they were unsuccessful. And there was also a motion to ask the division to look at the possibility of baiting on public lands, or on private lands, during that harvest objective hunt. That was also passed. The remainder of the bear motion was passed as presented. Cougar recommendations passed as presented. The fur bear recommendations passed as presented. And the coyote bounty rule amendments also passed as presented. The shed antler gathering recommendations also passed as presented. And the West Desert Complex Management Plan was passed as presented. The species variance, prohibited species variance was also passed as presented. And the restricted muzzleloader definition clarification passed as presented. So that pretty much wraps up the wildlife board meeting. Any questions regarding any of that? Okay, if not, we will head right into our first action item. Big game rule amendments. Dax, you're up. You have any clarifications for us before we open it up to questions?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I jumped ahead of things. We need to open it up to a motion to approve the agenda in the minutes from the last meeting. So sorry about that.
I move to approve the agenda and the past minutes.
Okay, we have a motion by Brad,
I'll second that.
seconded by Charles. All in favor? Steve? Motion passes unanimously. All right. Now we'll go to our action item.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. TJ, thanks for keeping us in order. So
Try it.
Yeah, not really anything to add here. Happy to answer any questions to help facilitate discussion. I can give a summary if you'd like.
Anybody want a summary? Okay, we'll open it up to questions from the RAC. No questions? Any questions from the? Brad's got a question.
I'm just curious about the
Yes, so the question was just how we came about to this agreement with the town of Alton. So many years ago, there was an issue where, you know, in and around the town, there's a lot of irrigated hayfields and then also deer in people's yards and that type of thing. And, you know, the division, the Alton CWMU and the town was all interested in building this deer exclusion fence around the town. That got built. And over the years, the fence hasn't been perfect. It's kind of gone into disrepair, especially in a few spots. We ended up with more and more deer inside that fence and in around the town. And then a few years back, there was, I think, a limited entry hunter harvested a buck that was kind of a town pet to some folks, and it just wasn't a good fit for buck hunting. At that time, we made a rule change and said we're not going to hunt deer in here anymore. And maybe we got a little ahead of ourselves. We still feel like it's probably not a good fit for buck hunting, just, you know, in people's yards and that type of thing. But we do have a lot of issue with deer in those hayfields, and the landowners are frustrated. So we're trying to walk it back a step and say, hey, I think we want to allow hunting to be used as a population management tool in this area. And the long-term vision, the regional folks have been working with the town of Alton, the landowners there, and also the CWMU in the area to say, hey, let's fix this. In the meantime, we need the ability to manage these animals that are in and around the town and in these hayfields. Hunting is preferable to the division and to those partners as well versus, you know, doing a division removal. We'd rather let hunters take those animals. And the long-term goal is to get those numbers down, get that fence improved, and avoid having the issue in the future. And the town is committed to help with that. The landowners are committed to help with that. The CWMU is committed to help with that. And the division's committed to be a partner as well.
Yeah, I'm just kind of wondering why that town specifically, because I've got an idea that if you reach out to a lot of rural communities, they have that same problem, both with farmers, ranchers, and residential people within. And so I wonder if, you know, I just wonder how you came to Alton of all places, because I think there'd be a huge interest from a lot of rural communities along the same lines, and how you would ever develop it all, I have no idea, but I'm just wondering.
Part of it, I think, is the history of that fence that's been there for decades. So I think that's part of why, because it you are correct. It's an issue we run into with kind of town interface, deer populations and stuff. It's something we deal with in a lot of places. I think the fence is what makes this situation a little more unique.
Any more questions for Dax? Go to questions from the audience. Do we have any public comment on this item?
Is this one, I believe?
Yeah.
Okay, so we had one public comment on this, supporting it, especially the improvement on skull importation and hunters being allowed to manage populations.
Thanks, TJ. Okay, we don't have any comment cards from the public for this item, so we'll go to open it up for RAC discussion. No discussion, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll motion to approve as presented.
Okay,
I can second that.
we have a motion by Charles to approve as presented, seconded by Dana. Any questions on the motion? Okay, let's go to a vote. Charles? Scoot? Tyler? Yes. Yes. Brad? Duke? Steve?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. Okay, next action item. Dax? I have a question, unless you have some clarifications you'd like to make first.
Just was going to remind folks, this is kind of the first permit setting go around with the new deer plan that got approved last fall. We went through the RAC and board cycle, got approved last December by the board. A little different where we did pass in the plan that provision that the biologists would just take into account the data, and on adjustments within 20% plus or minus of where permit numbers had been last year, we would just follow the data and implement permit numbers to manage to the objectives in the plans, in the plan. And then on any other change that exceeded that 20% threshold, we'd take it through for public feedback and input and a board action. So, and with that, yeah, jump to questions or whatever else, Eric.
With the new mite and hunt going to where those are not going in the draw, they're going to be basically issued as vouchers.
Yes.
How does that work? Can people essentially have $2 deer tags if they get one of those, or are they still limited to one tag?
Still be limited to $1 deer tag.
So they can't put in for the draw and then purchase one of those.
If they're successful in the draw, yeah, they're only gonna be able to have $1 tag, whether they get
Okay.
it through the draw or whether they do one of those. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Dax?
Hey Dex, can you tell us how they came up with the numbers for the Beaver West? I'm just curious how that worked, where it's a new hunt.
Yeah. So, and that's one that's gotten some attention, some discussion, some of the other RACs. It is a big increase from where we were last year on that unit. And if you'll remember in the deer plan, as part of the research study that's kind of running concurrently with the deer plan, we're trying restricted weapons on a few units. And that beaver is a unit that we divided in half. In the past, it was one unit, just the beaver unit. And now I-15 is the divider between like the Mineral Mountains and Bald Mountains on the west side of I-15, and then kind of the rest of the beaver east of I-15. The east part of the unit is the standard weapons we've used in the past for deer hunting. The beaver west is a restricted rifle hunt, restricted muzzleloader hunt. So it's a little bit of a unique situation because we are changing the boundary, splitting the unit, and it's a big increase as well. Part of that is 2 years ago when we asked for permit increases on the beaver, that didn't pass the board. We didn't get any permit increases. And then last year, if you might remember, we had kind of that special column for the southern region in the deer permit recommendations. We only recommended about half of the permit increase we needed to manage to the objective. Well, so we haven't got probably the permit increases we needed on that unit the last couple of years, and we changed the objective from an 18 to 20 to a 15 to 17. So what the biologist did is went through all of his data, looked at it for the whole beaver unit, how many permits would I need to add to manage to the new objective of 15 to 17? Did that calculation. And then he went back, and we have not collected the data at the scale that we're managing at now, but he went back through his classification data for the last 10 years and tried to break out all of his classification by whether it was on the Beaver East or Beaver West. And it was about a 2/3 or 70% of it was on the Beaver East. The other 30% to a third was on the Beaver West. And so that's how he divided the permits once he figured out the total number that he figured he would need on that unit to manage to the new objective. And it's, we have some data, but it's maybe not perfect. And the biologist is, taking his best stab at where he thinks it needs to be. It's one of those things we probably need to refine it a little bit over some years as we dive in and get going with this new hunt strategy. Exactly what success rates might look like on restricted weapons hunts. Some of these things are still to be seen, and the data collection now will be doing it at the new scale with the divided unit. So that'll change a little bit too. So that's where the recommendation came from, and kind of the process behind it. And it's one of those things that's adaptive management. You take our best stab at it, and then we'll roll forward and make adjustments as we need.
Any other questions?
What's the normal permit split between any legal weapon, muzzleloader, and then archery? And then how could that be changed? I guess, is that in rule, or is that something that could be changed in the future?
Yeah, so right now on units that just have an archery hunt, a muzzleloader hunt, and a rifle hunt, the split is 20% archery, 20% muzzleloader, 60% any legal weapon or rifle. If it's a unit that has an early rifle hunt and then the standard rifle hunt, it's 20-20, 20-40. So, and in the plan, we do have the ability to change those splits if there's a compelling reason to change the splits. On a couple units, we have recommended slightly different splits. The Vernal Bonanza general season unit is slightly higher archery permits, just because the rifle hunt on that unit is typically the highest success rate in the state. So the biologist there feels like they're trying to give a little bit more opportunity in the archery hunt because it lets a few more people hunt because success rate isn't as high. And in this year's recommendation for the Thousand Lakes limited entry hunt, which is a new limited entry hunt, we also recommended a slightly different permit split, a 30-30-40. So with 30% archery, 30% muzzleloader, 40% rifle. But those could be changed, and that is something, the RAC could vote on, a different split.
And that can be changed unit by unit, correct?
Yes.
Why did you ask that question?
Any other questions for Dax?
I guess
I got a quick question.
Go ahead, Steve, and then Scoot.
Sorry, Scoot. I stepped on you probably. Dax, I apologize. I wasn't sure on the presentations you did the proper place to bring this question up, but I just was curious if you guys have had any surprises or what you're learning from the mandatory harvest data that you're gathering. I know that you're suggesting changing some of the timing on that so that you could get that data. Is there any surprises or anything you're learning from that you maybe you didn't expect?
Yeah, that's a great question. The short answer is no. I went through and looked at our general season elk and general season deer success rates and what we had from the previous methodology where we did, the random phone surveys and asked hunters, and then versus this last year where we had mandatory harvest reporting. We had about 90% compliance with the mandatory harvest reporting. And there's a few people that are going to get surprised this week when they go to put in on the last day and they can't put in. I feel a little bad for our folks working at the front counters or in licensing. They're going to get yelled at by those folks. But the success rates for general season elk, general season deer, they're all kind of within a 1% or 2% of where we've been the last 5-6 years. So no huge surprises. We do have better sample sizes on our, especially like our units with really small permit numbers. We're getting a little bit better sample sizes. And those are the ones where I think we probably see the most variation. On general season deer hunts, our sample sizes are big enough. There really wasn't much change in the data. It's probably those, if we do have a hunt, like a hams hunt that only has 5 permits or something like that, that's where it might be good to get, get a harvest survey from all 5 of those hunters versus, but we've already had it mandatory for limited entry anyway. So yeah, haven't seen any big changes.
Thank you.
Okay, Scoot.
So back to the Beaver West, that number of 900, is that are you guys plugging in like an anticipated success rate with the modified weapons?
Yeah. So, well, the biologist said he did take that in consideration. He's not exactly sure where that's going to be, but anticipates a little bit lower success rate than what we see on the non-restricted weapons. Yeah. And this is one Southeastern region last night, or sorry, Southern region last night did vote to reduce those permit numbers. And I've tried to be pretty candid with the RACs. The biologists feel good about where the recommendation is. And admittedly, it's an aggressive recommendation. He's trying to manage to the new objective. And that's why we have the public process. If folks want us to go a little slower there, we're open to that input as well.
Can you explain the reason to go down to the 15, 17 buck per doe? Because it sounds like if that was the choice, people should manage to it.
Yeah. So, and I could talk about this for an hour. I won't. We had a lot of discussions about this when we went through the statewide deer plan revision. And, we manage for our general season deer hunting opportunities to either 15 to 17 or 18 to 20. And there's pros and cons to that. If you manage to the slightly lower buck to doe ratio objective, more people can hunt. You typically have a little bit lower success rates and more folks are able to hunt. And that was, I think, just big picture was a change we made in the statewide plan revision. I think we have 31 units. It used to be about 20 of those units were 18 to 20 and 10 or 11 were 15 to 17. And we pretty much flip-flopped that with this new plan where 20 of them are in the 15 to 17, that little bit lower category, and only, I think, 11 are in the 18 to 20. And so, and the idea behind that was to let more people get out and hunt more often. And so that's also one of the things is it seems like whenever we talk about that part of deer management, everyone's like, yeah, sounds good. And then when it comes time to actually recommend the permit numbers that we need to manage to those objectives, everyone says, oh, whoa, hold up. That's too much, too fast. And that's part of why, we have that automatic 20% adjustment built into the plan, because in Utah, we just love our deer to death. We love our deer so much that sometimes we have a hard time following through with the management objectives that we approved just a few months ago. And now we have a hard time setting the permit numbers to actually manage to them. I think it's just because we love our deer so much. It always sounds like a better idea when it's on somebody else's unit. And then when it's on your unit, it's kind of hard sometimes. So.
Any other questions from the RAC? Tyler?
I can't remember how many of them actually fell outside the 20% increase or decrease this go round. I don't remember.
It was a small number. I think 8 or 9 general season deer recommendations. And I'd anticipate even less than that next year.
Most of them were due to the change in buck to doe ratios.
Yes.
Correct.
Yep. Or boundary adjustments where we felt like some of those were convoluted enough. We probably should take them through the public process.
Okay, there's no more questions from the RAC. We'll see if there's any questions from the public. You want to summarize the online comments?
No comments. We had one person vote and they strongly agreed with the recommendations.
Okay, we do have one comment card. Looks like maybe 2. So if you belong to a organization, we'll give you 5 minutes if you need it. If you're an individual, we'll give you 3 minutes to come up and make your presentation. We'll start with John Bear, and then we'll go with Jeremy.
John Bear with SFW. Appreciate your time and your willingness to be here and make all the hard decisions. I saw a guy look just like you in Phoenix the other day, by the way. Yeah. Anyway, SFW feels like on the Beaver West, having some pretty lively discussion with our membership and our fulfillment committee meeting that maybe a little more cautious step with the permit increase would be the way to go. And we voted that maybe 500 permits might be a little softer landing spot. Still move the direction the plan calls for, but not quite so aggressive. On the Oak Creek limited entry deer and the San Juan limited entry deer, we voted to ask the division and the RAC and the boards to leave those numbers as is and not increase those. There was a lot of different discussions and a lot of reasons, but that's what we came up with. So once again, appreciate everybody's time and willingness to deal with this, and that's our recommendation for the RAC to consider. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Jeremy Anderson.
Before he goes, could you clarify, which units did you want to have stay as is?
The San Juan limited entry deer unit and the Oak Creek limited entry deer unit.
Why was that, John, on those two?
What's that?
What was the reason?
What was the reason?
Mhm.
Is that they didn't want to add permits.
Oh, okay, perfect.
I think I just felt like they were in a good spot, not in a position where they felt like adding permits was the right thing to do. Some guys felt like the quality was in a good place, let it be there. Some guys on the Oak Creek I know of that we talked to felt like the Oak Creek's good, but teetering a little bit, probably not a good time to add permits. So does that answer your question? All right. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Jeremy.
It's always tough following John, celebrity and everything. Thanks to the Southeast RAC for having us. Appreciate you guys and everything you guys are doing. MDF definitely supports the recommendations by the division. One thing I'm super excited about is the fact that these biologists are able to do what they're supposed to do. With this 20% variance, we did that in the mule deer management plan. We had a lot of discussions in the Southern RAC last night, and I think it's just great to see, these guys are out in the field every day. They're looking at these deer. They know the deer better than, well, a lot of people know the deer better than everybody else, but I just really think it's great that we're giving this variance to them. So thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Okay, that's all our public comments. We'll open it up to RAC discussion.
So
Tyler, you
Eric,
want to answer her question now?
well, I guess I had a question if I could ask now.
Go ahead.
It was really nice to remind us about that study down there. And so I'm actually curious on how the permit number increase or decrease or adjustment would affect that study. Like, is that going to be an issue or?
Yeah, we had some discussion on this last night, and I don't know if we were able to see eye to eye on it, but the idea is I think the phrase that was used really frequently along with this was, can we increase opportunity while maintaining quality by going to restricted weapons where you might lower success rates or lower selectivity of hunters? And so when we look at how we can evaluate that and move forward from a research standpoint, there's some biological components we can measure. There's also some social components we would look to measure as far as hunter satisfaction, draw odds, demand, application numbers, that type of thing. One of the things is if we had a completely static deer population that didn't change, I think we could leave permit numbers the same and it would work great. If our deer population grows or our deer population declines, we would want to be able to adjust permit numbers to manage for a constant buck to doe ratio. That is the variable that we would like to keep constant, and adjusting permit numbers to manage to the buck to doe ratio is a constant. It's what we do on all general season units around the state. If we don't adjust permit numbers and the population grows or shrinks, then suddenly that muddies the waters. And, you know, if you ask hunters, are you more satisfied hunting a unit that's managed at 15 to 17 bucks per 100 does or a unit that's managed at 27 to 29 bucks per 100 does? I'll bet you $100 they're going to choose the unit that's managed for 27 to 29 bucks per 100 does. So that's why we feel like we've got to adjust the permit numbers to manage for a constant buck to doe ratio so we can actually evaluate what the restricted weapons component of the research is doing rather than evaluating variable buck to doe ratios with a confounding factor of also having restricted weapons in there.
Hey, Dax, you mentioned there was a lot of comment in the southern region about that last night. What did they vote?
They voted to reduce permit numbers for both Beaver East and West.
Oh, okay. So that starting, I guess that first year of tags for both of those, but especially on the west side, would be kind of your datum, and then you'd adjust from there to try to keep it within that 15 to 17.
And the biologist is trying to make a recommendation to get it to 15 to 17.
That's his best guess, to get it there the first year.
He's trying to have it at the objective, the buck to doe ratio objective as we begin, you know, as we get into the study as soon as possible.
All right, thanks.
I guess I want to comment a little bit. I'm like, and I want to be really clear. I'm not coming at any one group because I think there's a lot of people, but this whole attitude on the beavers is what got us here. God forbid we raise tags on the beaver. And then we change the plan and we've got this huge amount of ground to make up and we're still having the exact same argument, which is God forbid we raise tags on the beaver. So it's like we want to keep making the same choice and expect a different result, no matter which management plan we're following, whether it's the old one or the new one. And that's a little harder for me to get behind, because one of the best things that came out of this plan was that we're going to manage to the plan, because that's what we all agreed on. So I feel, for me personally, I'll just speak to the beaver, but Beaver East and West, I would like to see us go with the division's recommendation, try to manage the objective, don't have one more variable in there when we're trying to see if restricted weapon hunts work or not. And like I said, the issue is we're unwilling to raise the permits. That is why we have this problem of we're dumping 1,000 tags on a unit in one hit. I keep making the same mistake. And I realize there's maybe others that feel differently, but that is how I feel.
Charles?
I kind of agree. We agreed on this mule deer plan and that 20% variance. Heard from 2 sportsmen's groups now about liking this proposal, and I've heard from one sportsman's group that wants to kind of change it. For me, representing sportsmen, that sounds like we need to stick with what we've got. We voted on this plan and the way this is going to play out, and we should probably stick to our guns and see how it's going to play out.
I'll just make a comment, kind of in regards to that. These particular units are units that are above the 20%. So that's why it's coming through the RAC. So we do have that option as a RAC to discuss that and see. And with it being the first year, I can understand the hesitancy to go too big. We've done that in the past, and we end up with this. So I agree. We all passed the new plan, but this falls within the plan, and that's why it's coming through the public process. So
Yeah, I get these ones are the ones that are outside, but we're still, from what I've heard from sportsmen's groups and the public, is to let this play out.
Tyler?
So my comment from before, adjusting the percentages across the weapon choice, I see more tags in archery as an opportunity for more folks to get out. Success rate is usually lower. I know we give youth quite a bit of those, but I think it would be a good opportunity, just to be able to give more tags to folks if they choose to go archery. You could look at muzzleloader as well. I imagine the success rates have dipped a little bit with the change in optics on those. I'm kind of anxiously awaiting to see how everything goes. I love following the data. It's really nice to be basing numbers off the data that's been collected over the years of GPS collar studies. Yeah, my worry is just weather. I think it's such a huge confounding part of any of our deer herds, whether it be drought or snow or too much snow, that, you know, that could play such a big role that it could cover up what we're trying to discover. But it's going to be interesting as we take this ride to see if managing to a lower buck to doe ratio is going to help our herds grow faster, more fawn recruitment, healthier herds. But yeah, I'm excited, but a little anxious about it.
Thanks, Tyler. I'll kind of add to your comments a little bit. I've had that same discussion with several people regarding the splits, because I kind of in the past felt the same way about archery being able to provide more opportunity. And the one thing that always gets brought up to me is that when you look at the percentages of hunters in the state of Utah, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I've got numbers, but about 17% of the hunters in Utah hunt with archery tackle. And so when you start taking permits away from 80+% of the hunting public, it creates an issue. So, but you're right. It does with in all the things that we look at, we look at success rate, and with lower success, it creates more opportunity. But if it's only for a small percentage of the people that hunt, it may not be the best option. So, any other comments, Scoop?
Yeah, just so going back to the tag numbers on the Beaver West, I agree with you guys. Like, I think it's crazy when we're super hesitant to be able to put tags back when we think there can be tags, and I don't like that at all. There's a couple things here. First of all, it is a new unit, so it's not a percent increase of anything necessarily, because it's its own unit, right? But I'm a little worried just after listening to the Southern RAC. They did have a lot of comments just saying that's just going to overload that landscape with people, and it could create the potential for a negative experience for the first year of trying out this new hunt type. I'm not necessarily saying that I have a strong opinion one way or the other, but there were a lot of voices over there for the people that know that area and hunt that area. I've never hunted it, so I don't have an opinion, but just hoping that at least it's something that the board can discuss when they get to that point and decide how they want to. So I don't know if I want to make a recommendation that they at least discuss that, you know, make sure they pay special attention to that unit just to help the Southern out and what they're trying to do.
Any other discussion? If not, we'll open it up to motions. I guess before we do that, there was a couple of other units that were mentioned. Is there any discussion regarding those other two units, the limited entry units? Okay, we'll open it up for motions.
I guess one quick question. So one of the units that we're talking about here is in our region, right? The LaSalle's. I don't know if it'd be useful to have Ian or Dustin maybe come and tell us a little bit about that increase, but if everyone's good with it, then we don't need to.
Are you talking Elk Ridge, the San Juan Elk Ridge limited entry deer unit?
Oh no, I was talking LaSalle's. One of the regions that's the permit recommendations is outside of the 20% is the LaSalle unit.
Oh yeah, sorry, I missed.
So
You're, and
I'm actually good with this. So if everyone else is, then I'm fine with not having to have any additional comments.
And this is a funny comment for me to make, but I'm going to make it. I hope the RAC knows, like, we rely on you to look at these and get feedback and vote. And I hope you don't feel like we're trying to pigeonhole you or lock you in with data. So you always have to agree with the division. Vote your conscience, vote for the constituencies you represent. And you know, you're already, a lot of your options have already really kind of been narrowed down with the new 20% protocols in the plan. So yeah, just vote your conscience. Don't feel like you have to do something. Yeah, so thanks.
Don't worry, Dax. We still have elk to talk about. Okay.
It's worth pointing out too, that came from the Mule Deer Committee, and that did not come, that's not something the division came up with and said, hey, here's an idea we have. That came from members of the committee saying, we're sick of having these recommendations that come from biology and then having a group of people show up and completely turn it upside down, is where it came from. So I don't think it came from a point of trying to eliminate the RAC process.
With that, Scoot, just to kind of speak to that, I guess, the 20% was set up in the deer plan. That passed our RAC, passed the board, and I want to remind everybody of that. That being said, that does not mean that we cannot bring up those issues, even though they fall within that, and still have discussion. And if there's a motion that needs to be made, so be it. You know, again, I remind you that we accepted the deer plan, but that is something as a RAC that can be done. So,
Yeah, and I know I came off really strong there earlier, but I do want to agree with Eric on this point. Like, we get a shot once a year to talk about permit numbers. So, I mean, this is it, right? Like, if we're going to talk about it, let's talk about it. Let's bring it up. Let's say what needs to be said. And I agree. We shouldn't just be like, well, people have already applied, so I don't think we should change them. Or, you know, the division kind of said this is the way it needs to be, so we shouldn't talk. No, I definitely agree that if this RAC feels strongly that there needs to be something done differently, this is our opportunity to do it. So we should follow through with it.
and again, what we decide on here, it will just be a recommendation to the board. The board will decide what's going to happen and what the division has to do. So,
Speak a little bit on that LaSalle unit as somebody who's, the LaSalles are in my backyard and hunt that unit pretty hard. I like to see the increase. We have CWD there, pretty prevalent. We have 2 hunts that we've established for CWD in that area. I think being aggressive on that unit is a good call, at least to get more data on that and figure out where we actually stand. We share that herd with Colorado too. They have some different numbers than we do when it comes to CWD. So I think really hunting that unit, putting hunters on the landscape and figuring out where we are with that, especially with, we might not find out all the CWD data, but we'll find out harvest data on there. And I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, and I think that high buck-to-doe ratio came on the tail of one of a very high success rate. Right. Yeah, so it was a really high success rate in LaSalle's.
okay, we're still open for motions.
I'd move to support the Southern unit's recommendation on the Beaver West. They probably went lower than what I would recommend, but I would say maybe do, 2/3 of the 900, take it down to 600. I think at that point, it's really just giving us a datum like, hey, this is where it's going to start out. Next year, if the buck-to-doe ratio is super high, then everyone's going to have to be ready to bite that off and really increase the tags.
So you want, your motion is to move that to 600 permits rather than 900?
Yeah, and that's kind of arbitrary, honestly, but yeah, 600.
Okay.
Higher than what the others have recommended.
Okay, we have a motion by Scoot to hold the Beaver West tags to 600 rather than the 900 that was presented. Do we have a second?
They reduced the other one as well in their motion, I think. Yeah.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Scoot, seconded by Tyler. Any discussion on the motion?
I guess,
Well,
what is your reason? Is it the overcrowding by people or?
You know, my main reason is this is one of the units that's still open for discussion. And there was a lot of people that showed up in the Southern Region RAC last night and voiced their opinion that they thought that was too much to start with. Not that it couldn't get there or be there eventually, but they all felt that it was too much to start with. And I think it'd be doing them that. Granted, that's not our RAC. There's no one here saying that, right? But having watched theirs, I think that supporting that and listening to that public comment is important. And usually when these motions get made, if there's more than one RAC that supports it, it carries a little more weight to the division. They may talk about it a little bit more on the board level.
Any more discussion on the motion? Okay, let's vote. Charles?
No.
Scoot?
Yes.
Tyler?
Yes.
Cash?
No.
Anna?
No.
Brad?
No.
And Steve?
No.
Motion fails 5-2. That means we need another motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the division's recommendation as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Who seconded it? Charles? Okay, we have a motion by Cash to accept the division's proposal as presented, seconded by Charles. Any discussion on that motion? Charles, let's vote.
Yes.
Steve or Scoot?
Yes.
Tyler?
No.
Cash?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
And Steve?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1. Tyler, you want to clarify?
I think just starting afresh with that one where there's not much, it's been an entire unit before. I think we're going to have enough data from around the state with everything staying as is, with those that were within the 20% threshold. We're going to be able to gather information. We're going to learn a lot from these restricted weapons, harvest rate things that are going to come out of that. And a better estimate could be given next year. Maybe it'll go up, maybe it'll go down. But yeah, that's.
Okay, thank you. All right, before we move to the next action item, I want to take just a second. In my haste to get through this long agenda item, I failed to recognize a few people. We have some of our wildlife board members with us, both in person and online. We appreciate all of you taking time to come and be here and support our RAC. And also all of the division people who put in a ton of times through these RAC meetings. So thank you all. Okay, we'll move to agenda item 6, once in a lifetime permit recommendations. Rusty, do you have any clarifications for us?
I do not, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to jump in.
Okay, we'll open it up for questions from the RAC.
I have one. There's been some discussion about Wasatch West. And, a lot of concerning things there. I believe it was mentioned in the presentation, though, that you're recommending a reduction in tags for now, but there's this potential to seeing how things play out over the next couple months. You might bump them up at the end. Has there been any discussion within the division about how much lead time would be given to those applicants that would pick up those extra permits if that happened?
I think in the perfect world, we'd give them as much lead time as possible so they could prepare for the hunt. But these disease events are pretty hard to to predict. And so I think once we have a good handle on it, if things are looking good, you know, we would go ahead and notify those people as soon as we possibly could. But if it's an active die-off, or, you know, it may be a last minute thing where we try to decide, you know, what makes sense to bring in more hunters or not. Yeah.
I got a question on that too. I guess I've never been selected for an alternate list. Do you notify them that they are on the alternate list before?
If you've applied for that unit and you didn't draw, you're on the alternate list. And so what it does is it obviously the max point holders would come out, and then, you know, the random hunters would come out, and then it's a sorted list of, you know, if you were the next in line based on the number that was assigned to you in the draw. And then we go in order and call those people in order and see if they're willing to do something like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
but they're not notified like preemptively that, hey, we might be calling you.
No, it's
Okay.
just if you applied for that hunt and you didn't draw, you're on that alternate list somewhere. You just don't know what order you're in.
So
Yeah.
everyone that applied should be scouting right now.
There you go. Yeah.
Get out of the house.
You're saying there's a chance.
Any other questions for Rusty?
I think I noticed that there was an increase or proposed increase for the Sanderford North bighorn sheep. And I guess I'm just kind of curious if you can talk about maybe what's causing them to maybe do well. Like what recreation pressure do you see on them? Or are there some things that, you know, BLM can do better on habitat management? But yeah, could you talk more in detail about that herd?
Wade, is that something you'd like to come speak on, recreation pressure and things like that? I can speak to, you know, what causes sheep populations to do well in general, and especially these desert populations. It just seems like, you know, most of these populations have disease there. It's just there, and it's just going to be there. And it seems to slow roll through these populations, and then they pull out of it and they rebound a little bit, and then it kind of cycles through again. And so at least for now, we had a good last flight, was really good, kind of a lot of sheep, a lot of rams. And so that would be the reason for the increase, but I'll let Wade speak to more of that.
Yeah, so that's basically what I would say. Sometimes a survey doesn't go as well as we want, and sometimes we miss sheep. Sometimes we you know, just don't see them. And so we do have a sightability, 60% sightability in the chopper, but sometimes it doesn't go as well. So this time, you know, we've had extended drought, then we had good moisture last year, but overall, it's a good sign, and I can't really put my finger on it because they do have, you know, the disease there. So I just glad that we counted more and that we can increase tags a little bit. So yeah. Okay.
Any other questions from the RAC? Any questions from the audience? You want to summarize the online comment?
We had one that strongly agreed with the recommendations.
Love the public comment. We have one public comment, John Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Bear, SFW. Couple things when it comes to once in a lifetime, particularly sheep, I would guess. I just watched kind of my pet herd of Rocky Mountains above Springville there get sick, and within a few weeks, most of the rams died off right there above town that we all spend all our weekends watching. And it's heartbreaking. It really is. We all know that's part of the game. And those are the kind of things that we hate to see happen. But thinking about that, and in light of some of the things that have gone on in the last few years, we would ask that just kind of to keep it in the public record and in the discussion. And let me just say that I think we are very lucky to have Rusty. I think if you could scour the country and find one guy to put in charge of your once in a lifetime program, specifically your sheep program, that's the guy. So as I say this, I'm not shooting at Rusty, Kay. In fact, we're kind of leaning on him to help us out. We would like to find ways to increase the opportunity for people to burn once in a lifetime points, specifically sheep. Whether it's management hunts, sometimes you see these units, they do really good for a few years, and then all of a sudden we have an abundance of, 3, 4, 5-year-old rams that decide they don't like Big Brother and they want to go walkabout, and they just take off, bring back a case of mycoplasma, and there goes your herd. If there's a way we could find, a way to get some guys with some permits to check a box when they apply so we know who they are, so that when things like that happen, we can call them and get somebody to go out and put a tag on that ram. When the herd shows up sick and you get a bunch of rams that start coughing, let's find a way to get somebody on the mountain. And that, granted, that hunt might not be for everybody. Not everybody's as diehard as Scoot is. It's just a fact. But let's get some guys that are willing to do that. Everybody's situation's a little different. Let's get some guys that are willing to do that, to go up there and try to take advantage of those rams and not just see them die on the mountain. So I guess we're looking for a little nudge from the public process here to maybe put some language in the minutes or whatnot, so that when we work through our sheep plan here, is it next year, Rusty? This year, we're coming up on our sheep plan this year, that those things get discussed. So that's our recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Okay, anyways, that was the last comment, so we will open it up for RAC discussion. I'll start. I like John's idea. I think that's something that we as a RAC need to look at, making a motion to ask the division to look at those types of things, because I'd lots rather see sportsmen who are willing to burn those points take these sheep than have them just die and be coyote bait out there because they get sick. So any other comments?
I agree with that. I'm running into a lot of folks actually like my age, late 20s to late 30s, that are just getting into hunting. And a lot of them are coming to me asking me about how this all works. And I feel like those folks, especially with once in a lifetime tags, are never going to pull a tag. So they'd be skookum to take an opportunity like that.
Welcome, Darren. Tyler?
Do you catch these rams in transit, or are they spotted back around the herds, coughing and sick?
Yeah, we do have wandering rams every once in a while that'll wander, outside where they should be into a little more risky areas. And I appreciate what John said. First of all, I don't know what part of the country he's scouring, but you could probably throw a rock and hit somebody that'd do a better job. But I think we all want the same thing when we have these issues. Number one, we want to keep sheep healthy at all costs. And number two, when we have those things that pop up, we'd much rather a hunter come in and take care of that problem than us. And there's some challenges with that. Sometimes, we're always going to prioritize herd health over getting a hunter there. And so if it's something that's time sensitive and we just need to remove that ram, we're probably going to do it. But if there's an opportunity to bring in a hunter, and we've done that and we've tried that, and sometimes it's hard to find somebody that's willing to go shoot a 3-year-old ram. But like you said, Charles, they're out there, and we could probably do a better job of looking for them and identifying them. And when we have these die-offs, there's times where it may not be sporting anymore when these sheep get really, really sick. And so we would take that into consideration as well, whether or not, it's sporting to bring in a hunter at that point. One more thing, if I could wax philosophical for a little bit and pull a Covey. It's actually refreshing to hear some of these comments, because sometimes the sentiment is, no, let's stockpile rams until they're all 11 years old, and let's not hunt them until they get there. And then you watch enough die-offs and the attitude changes, like, no, we're just letting these animals go to waste, and it's really heartbreaking. And so it's nice to hear these comments of, let's bring in hunters, let's let people hunt these sheep while we have them, because they may not be here tomorrow. And so I appreciate the sentiment.
Charles, the correct answer when new people approach you is tell them hunting sucks, stay away from it. It's already hard enough to draw.
Hard enough to explain them how this process works to get a tag in. They usually look at me wide-eyed like, what are you talking about, points and units and all this other stuff.
Okay, any other discussion? We'll entertain motions.
I move that we accept the division's recommendations.
Okay, have a motion by Brad to accept as presented. We have a second.
I guess I want to clarify here if there's any way I can make a motion to have the board, have the DWR look into some sort of depredation hunt or something like that.
Yeah, we can do that separate from this, so we can approve the motion, and then you can make that motion separately. No, we still need a second.
Oh, I'll second.
Okay. Seconded by Cash. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, let's vote. Charles?
Yes.
Scoot?
Yes.
Tyler?
Yes.
Cash?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
And Steve?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. Okay, Charles, you're up.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to have the DWR look into doing some sort of depredation hunt for once in a lifetime animals due to disease or drought or other factors that are outside of our control.
Yeah,
Can
it'd
I-
probably be like having them select, list themselves as an alternate, like a willing alternate in a quick situation for maybe a lesser quality ram,
Yeah.
when they put in for the,
I think probably the best way to approach this motion is to solicit the board, the wildlife board, to ask the division to look at those things.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to solicit the board to ask the division to look into a depredation style hunt for once in a lifetime animals due to factors outside of the DWR hunter's control.
Second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Charles to ask the board to get the division to look into opportunities. I can only pronounce it one time. That's too big a word. Ask the board to look for opportunities for hunters particularly on sheep, on all once in a lifetime. And they can work out the details. That's the motion. It was seconded by Brad. Any discussion on the motion? You got that?
I hope so. I
Okay.
think so.
You want to read it back to him, see if it's
Sure. So the motion is to have the board solicit DWR to look at depredation style hunts for once in a lifetime species.
Yeah.
particularly sheep.
I didn't say particularly sheep, but
You can strike that then.
Okay.
Okay. No discussion. Are we ready for a vote? Charles?
yes.
Scoot?
yes.
Tyler?
Yes.
Cash?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. Okay, that does it for that agenda item. We will move to Agenda item 8, Pronghorn Permit Recommendations. Huh?
He's trying to keep the meeting going, just.
Oh, yeah. Glasses help. Sorry. We'll go to agenda item 7 then. Elk Permit
Okay.
Recommendations. All right.
I just know I'm up a lot. I don't remember what number everything is.
Thanks for
We-
keeping me in
We can
line.
change the order if you want to, but. For elk, I guess just jumping into it, we passed a new statewide elk plan a couple years ago. We have a couple years worth of data with some changes to the age objectives and a little bit of change to the permit splits and season structure type of stuff. This recommendation would be for the third year into this new elk plan. It was a 10-year plan, and we did have a commitment that we'd have a mid-plan review after the first 3 years worth of data. So next summer, we'll probably have a mid-plan review and look at how things are going so far. And things seem to be going fairly well, kind of according to how we hoped they would go at this point, and happy to answer any questions or help with the discussion on this.
With the 2 years of data behind us, what are we seeing as far as, a lot of those permits were moved from the early rifle to the mid-season hunt. Typically, younger bulls are killed. What are we seeing? What's the differences?
So, I think that was kind of our assumption that we'd see maybe the age classes drop. It hasn't really played out that way. They've stayed about the same on most units, even, there's some exceptions here and there, but I would say across the board, most units are looking still fairly stable. We saw a few units actually jump in age with the increase in permits and the shift to more permits in that mid-rifle season. A couple units went down, but nothing super dramatic either. And the first year into the new plan, on those units where we had changed age objectives, I think we recommended about a 16% increase on those units. And this year, I think it's about an 8 or 9% increase kind of across the board on those units where the age objective had changed. Yeah, we're still seeing fairly high success rate on that mid-season rifle hunt, and they're still killing relatively old bulls. So it's not like the bottom dropped out or anything by changing those dates.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so, we got 2 year, and this feels bad because I feel like I'm preemptively asking for information, right? Because I'm on the edge of my seat for it, but I was wondering, can you give any insight as far as especially with this last year where we did the mandatory harvest reporting, any differences, positive or negative, that you're seeing with us getting rid of multi-season elk permits on our any bull units? Are you guys seeing got any data for us there about things that went good, things that went bad, anything like that?
So, we never had an overlap of any bull, multi-season any bull, and mandatory harvest reporting. But in the previous data sets, harvest data sets we had, the multi-season permits have a higher success rate than the folks that just buy one season, an elk permit for one season. We do still have multi-season spike permits, and the success rate for those multi-season permit holders tends to be a little bit higher than the folks that just buy a general season elk permit for one season. General season elk success for spike units, any bull units, they're usually pretty similar success rates, 11 to low teens type percent success. So they're hard hunts. They usually have lower success rates.
Do you remember off the top of your head how much higher on the spike units, the multi-season success rate?
I'd have to look. I can't remember off the top of my head. There's only like 8 million numbers I should remember at all times.
I remember right. It wasn't a huge difference.
No, it's maybe mid to upper teens rather than lower teens.
Yeah. I might be getting too specific here, but it'll prep you for next year when we're talking about it. So with getting rid of the multi-season any bull permit, did you see higher satisfaction rates for the archery hunters in the state or the muzzleloader hunters?
I haven't looked at that. I haven't looked at their satisfaction. Usually satisfaction is highly correlated with success rate, and success rates didn't really change much. So I'm guessing they were probably pretty similar. I'm guessing they didn't change much either.
I do have one other question that's different, but I can let someone else go.
You have a question, Charles?
Well, I kind of have a question, but I don't know if it should fall more in the discussion, but it is a question about units with, and I guess it's more than antlerless, so I'll wait for the antlerless.
Okay, Cash.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the beaver unit? And sorry, this feels super leading, but why the tag recommendation isn't even higher than what it is this year for the beaver unit?
And we might have to ask the biologist to really dive into the detail, but I know some of the discussion there felt like we really have a stockpile of bulls on the beaver. The average age is old. They're harvesting old bulls, but the bull to cow ratio and the calves being recruited into the population, there's a stockpile of bulls. Elk are relatively long lived. It also won't last forever. And I think sometimes biologists are more comfortable kind of easing into that tipping point than just going right off a cliff. And sometimes maybe we err on the side of being a little conservative. But.
Any other questions? Any questions from the audience? You want to summarize the online?
Yes. So on this one, we had one individual that strongly agreed.
Okay, we have one public comment card, John Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here at the request of some of my good friends in the San Juan area that love elk and love the San Juan unit, and asked that the permit numbers on that unit be left as is. And some of the discussion and the reasons were that they just feel like there's enough and that things are fine and let's just let it ride. And Rusty asked a question. I'd just like to clarify. He wants to know where we have looked to put him at the top of the list. And I informed him that we have thoroughly scoured Paiute and Garfield counties to this point, and as of yet, he is still number one. So just so you know.
Thanks, Sean. Dex, that raised a question for me on the San Juan. What were the age objectives for the last 3 years?
Average ages for 2022 was 8.3. For 2022, the average age was 8.3. For 2023, it was 7.6. For 2024, it was 7.9. For 3-year average is 7.9. And again, it's a 6.5 to 7 age objective. So we're 0.9, almost a year above the age objective. And the recommendation was to go from 105 to 115 permits.
Thank you.
I got a question on that unit as well. Now, we had some discussion about that unit when we were talking about the elk plan, and there was a bit of history with that unit, specifically bull to cow ratios and how we went a little overboard on that unit in the past, and we were about 50-50, and it ended up declining. Where are we sitting on that unit right now, and is that being taken into consideration considering we've already been there with that unit?
I might see if I can call on one of the folks from the region to help me on that. And I'll get while one of them's coming up to get on the hot seat. I will tell you, it is complicated sometimes managing these units where we have kind of objectives that can be conflicting. If you're trying to manage for 7-year-old bulls, you can't harvest a lot of bulls. But if you're also trying to manage for a population objective, a certain number of animals in the population, and you've got to have harvest, you end up disproportionately harvesting antlerless elk to manage the population, which can put us in a spot where we end up with bull to cow ratios that aren't ideal. You know, that's part of why we have the spike hunt on a lot of units in the state, so we can harvest some more males in addition to just, you know, instead of just harvesting females where we're trying to be really restrictive on bulls. Sometimes it's tricky to keep all those balls in the air at the same time, trying to figure out that harvest. And I'll give a second here to Ian to give you the kind of the latest demographic snapshot of what stuff's looking like on the San Juan.
Yeah. Let me I'll pull up one more thing. But so Part of this is we were scheduled to fly both San Juan and LaSalle this year for elk. And as you all know, due to lack of snow, it was not a good survey year. So that got postponed for another year. So we're not scheduled to fly till next year now. But Dax has said it a few times, bull cow ratios coming from aerial surveys are not necessarily that reflective because bulls kind of break apart on their own, and small groups have lower sightability than our bigger groups of cows. And the same, so on our last survey in 2021, that aerial survey, the bull to cow ratio was 27 bulls per 100 cows. But again, that's may not be that reflective of what's actually going on. And then this past, let me pull up one more. Surveys. And then from our summer classification, which we do typically around July, our bull cow ratio on the San Juan was 23 bulls per 100 cows coming on the ground classification, which you're falling into the same deal. You know, you're looking for trying to find groups of elk, and sometimes those smaller groups of bulls break apart. So it's tough to make recommendations based on a bull to cow ratio, which is why we do the age objective. But yeah. Any questions on that front?
I guess not really a question, but kind of a discussion point on that is that's one of the units where it's very hard to draw. I had a buddy who drew, I think, 28 points this year. I feel like it's one of those units where they will always say, we don't want more, we don't want more, we don't want more, and at the point of destroying opportunity. So just think about that as he's taking the comments too, is, as John said, he heard from people that don't want any increase, but their reason was they just feel like it's good. It doesn't sound like biology to me.
Any other questions?
Yeah, we've just had a lot of numbers thrown out. Can someone, I don't have the sheet in front of me, can you remind me of what the permits are and what the recommendation is?
So recommended increase of 10 permits from 105 to 115, correct?
Yes. And I had the question about the multi-season spike success versus the standard season spike success. Multi-season spike success last year was 19%. It was 12% for the single season. So it is a little bit higher, the multi-season. And then the biologist from the beaver unit shot me a text message too, and he said, just a reminder, just 3 years ago on the beaver, we were at 38 permits. So we've made pretty aggressive increases. That's why he's not recommending going a lot more dramatic at this point. Just kind of that same idea of, do we go off the cliff full speed pedal to the metal, or do we kind of ease off the edge? But he felt like he's been pretty aggressive, and it's kind of at this point he's slowing down just a little bit.
Thanks, X. Any more questions? Any questions from the audience? Let me guess, we have one guy that strongly approves.
You are correct. One that strongly approves. Strongly agrees.
Okay, well, oh, we already went that one. I'm losing my mind tonight, sorry. If there's no more comments, we'll entertain motions. It's been a long night. Sorry. All right. We had the comments from the public. Now we need comments from more discussion. Any discussion? Any comments?
Yeah, I got a couple. This is more just like again a look out to next year. So I'm just getting it out in the minutes and on the record. But something that did not come through on the new elk management plan was to get rid of the multi-season elk hunt on the any bull units. But the board did that at the wildlife board meeting. I would like to have the division bring forth some data that either that shows that what type of effect came from that. And I hope it's a positive one, but I would definitely like to see if by getting rid of those permits, did we improve satisfaction? Did we help the elk herd? Did we have a better experience on the landscape, right? I mean, was that a fact? Because I found it incredibly interesting that we got rid of multi-season for any bull, but not for spike. And I was really confused about whatever the benefits were going to be for the one, why didn't it apply to the other? So I'd really like to see some data next year when we get to do this review after 3 years to see what effects came from that. That's one of the comments. I'll let someone else speak before I go somewhere.
Do you have any other comments? Tyler?
In regards to the San Juan, I do think that those top end bowls that has made the San Juan are no longer there. There'll always be a bowl that slips through here and there. It's nasty country. And there will always be one hidden in the nasty, but I think a lot of bulls that have been killed are just that. They're bulls. They're just old bulls that are never going to be anything. But I think we've hammered our top end, the ones with the genetics. They're just not nearly as prevalent as they once was.
Anecdotally, I would agree with him on that. And also just hearing, I mean, we talked to a lot of people down there, you know, the overriding sentiment is that we are definitely the big bulls are not what they used to be down there. And I understand that the elk plan has kind of changed the trajectory of what we're going to see or what we should expect to see down there. But I think there's a lot of people that I talk to that are concerned about that. And I'm just wondering if we've given it enough time with this increased amount of tags to actually expect to see an age difference, or if we should keep it right. I mean, because we've increased it a lot, right? And I understand that, but I'm wondering if with that increase, if we should let that ride a little bit and see if after a few years it actually decreases that age limit instead of just jumping on it the very next year, expecting it to happen from 1 year to the next.
Thanks. Yeah, I kind of agree. I think I've seen us go too high and then we have to cut permits, and I'd rather see us level out rather than come back next year and cut. You know, if the information that BYU presented in their findings at the elk plan, a 7-year-old bull, we'll be hunting 320 bulls on those units eventually. That'll be your top end if their data is accurate. I'm not so sure that I believe it, but that's what the data shows. So those top end bulls may be a thing of the past. So any other comments?
Yeah, can I ask a little bit? I don't want to get in a philosophical debate, but I feel like between a couple of comments that we've been switching through a couple of things, we've been saying, oh, the age is what determines our top end, or it's the genetics that determine the top end. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I want to, and maybe it's a little bit of both, right? But we could probably talk about, but I was like, I think there's a distinct difference between the two. And we talked about this a little last April when we were talking about permits, but like I went on big bull hunts a couple years ago and got to help people. We shot one bull that was 6 years old and we shot one bull that was 9 years old, and they were both 320. So, yeah, right. So, and then I guess I come back, another question that comes to my head when we're sitting here is like, I think what will preserve our top end bulls is if there's less hunters on the landscape. Is it really permit numbers? Or is it the fact that I can shoot 1,500 yards? I can e-scout. I can have all my buddies down here. I can film a bull 3 miles away. I can run trail cameras. Like, you know what I mean? So is it really the number of permittees that's killing our top end, or is it something else?
It's all of the above.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
just like with our buck to doe ratios, you control that number by permit numbers and hunter success. So
sure,
the more permits out there, the higher the success. So, but you're right. It is all of the above.
Yeah.
We are very good at finding and killing the biggest and best of every animal out there. So,
Yeah.
Scoot.
Yeah, and I'm here to represent sportsmen, right? So I'm just kind of relating what I hear in the talks that I have with people, and it's that hunting the bulls up there on the San Juan is not what it used to be. And so is that a function of age? Is that a function of, we're just killing the big bulls? I'm not sure. That's a good question, but that's just what everybody says, that they're really concerned about the high permit numbers because of that quality. They see it going down. And whether that's my opinion or not, I won't say, but that's what I'm hearing.
Well, the benefit of increasing tags now is if we have to go down later, everybody loves to cut tags in this state.
I want to say just one thing. I tend to agree with Cash and you that it's all of the above now. And I'm not certain that altering the permit numbers is going to make that big of a difference because of all of the above, because of what Cash pointed out with the scouting and the abilities to shoot these distances and stuff like that. I'm not sure the permit alteration is the answer necessarily.
I think a big problem we have in this state that continues to compound on itself is point creep. And 10 more tags, 10 more hunters on the landscape experiencing something they probably have been wanting to experience for the last 30 years. And it's kind of helping that point creep move some people through. And if we have to cut tags later, we'll cut tags later. But I think that it's going in the right direction and giving some opportunity out there.
And I'd actually like to build off of that to just talk on one of the units that stuck out to me, and that's why I asked about it. And it is the beaver unit. So last year we were 2.6 years over our age objective for that unit. Our 3-year average is still 2 years over that age objective. And I realized that we were just not that long ago, we were only issuing 40 permits, but that was the problem, right? And we do have a stockpile of elk, and I lean a little more towards Charles, which is I would like to see a few more permits issued for the beaver unit this year. I think out of all the ones that are on the list, that one stood out to me the most, where it's so far over objective. It went up in age last year, but we only did a 9 tag increase. And I know compared to 2 years ago, we're way high, but I come back to Charles, there's still a lot of people out there that would love to have a beaver tag, and the elk are up there. And I think we could push that just a little bit more. Personally, I'm thinking like 6 more tags. We could push it 6 more tags, and there's 6 more people that'll get to go out and hunt a bull elk on the beaver unit this year. And the age data certainly seems to say that we could push it just a little bit more.
The same people who want to go hunt those bulls will be the first ones to complain because there's too many people out there hunting.
So the argument with that is when I drew my limited entry tag, I had 2 days of me just hunting without any muzzleloader deer hunters out there. So we stack these people on top of each other no matter what. There are going to be people running through the hills.
I don't doubt it, but they'll be the same ones to complain. Okay. Tyler.
I think it just comes back to the balance of quality or quantity and opportunity. Obviously, I'll put my plug in for restricted weapons, even if it's just archery. Success rates do go down. We have a 4-week archery season in Utah. A lot of states don't. They'll run a couple weeks and then they'll run another round of archery for a couple weeks. That's at least New Mexico's model. I think you create opportunity with restricted weapons. But there's bulls that are going to get really old and they're never going to get big. But if there's 2 bulls standing there, which one are you going to shoot? The bigger one, right? Whether he's younger or older, it doesn't matter. But I'm here to tell you, if you ever get the opportunity to put your hands on a monster of an animal, you'll never forget it.
Thanks, Tyler. I know that Kent served on that elk committee, and I know that split archery season was discussed pretty heavily, I believe, and it wasn't something that come out of the committee favorable, but I'm not sure all the details, but I do know that it was discussed. So, any other comments? Let's entertain motions.
I guess in light of everything else I've said, I would rather have the opportunity to hunt and kill a 340 than window shop 400s my entire life. So I don't know, I'm kind of stuck in the middle of it all.
I'll make a motion. This is a much smaller one because I just want to pull it out of the way, but I'd like to make a motion that we increase the number of tags being recommended for the beaver unit by 6.
Okay, we have a motion on the table by Cash. Do we have a second on the motion?
I got some questions on it. We just really, besides your input on it, we didn't really discuss why they chose the amount of permits they did on the beaver. And I'd like to hear from biology.
Yeah, I feel like Dax addressed that first, and the biologist even commented that they feel like they're getting close to the peak, so they wanted to let off the gas a little bit. That's what I heard as the response. And maybe Dax has got more to add to that.
I guess just to add a little bit more. On deer, we have tons of data to where I think we feel pretty good that we can almost anticipate where stuff will be with deer. You know, we as close to a crystal ball as you can have. I think we have that, especially with general season deer. Elk, it's a little bit more responsive management rather than proactive management. We don't have the level and quality of data for elk as we do for deer. And so we're looking at ages, taking that into consideration. One of the other issues that we do have on the beaver was, I think it was 4, 5, 6 years ago, we were over objective, really hammered cows for a few years. And because of that, we ended up with like a 1-to-1 bull to cow ratio. We had a few years where success on the spike hunt was, I think, almost 0% success on the spike hunt because we just didn't get the reproduction because we didn't have the cows. So and the biologist told me that there's almost kind of some cohorts missing. Like all the bulls are old on the beaver. They're either really old or really young. We kind of are missing some of those cohorts just because we hunted cows super hard for a few years there to get to objective. That being said, you could probably add 6 permits to the beaver. It's going to result in the harvest of, 4 more bulls. I don't think that's going to tip the unit over one way or another. The biologists, they take all these different things into consideration, try to make a recommendation that's going to bring us to objective. And some biologists are a little more aggressive, some are a little more conservative, and they're really looking at stuff over, just to think back 6, 7 years ago, what we did with cows and how is that translating into what we have for bulls now. The biologists are looking at it at a level of detail and over a scale of time that not a lot of people are looking at it at that same scale. So, and that being said, the recommendations, that's why we have the public process and a recommendation like that to go a few more permits. I don't know that's going to make or break anything. Maybe it makes a few people feel more crowded. Maybe it makes a few people feel, happy that they get to draw a permit. All those things are probably true.
So just to speak to my motion a little bit, like the recommendation this year is to go up by 9. I'm saying 6 more, so you go up by 15. 15 more tags than it was last year is what I'm looking for a second on if we can get one.
Anybody want to second that?
Cash, I really want to second it, but I just don't know enough about the beaver. And I feel like I'd be in an awkward position to be making decisions for a different rack.
When we talk about point creep, obviously every tag helps, but each year it gets worse and worse. because for every tag we increase this year, Charles recruits 10 more of his non-hunting friends to put in. But that, I mean, that's the truth. You know, the population in Utah is growing tremendously. Not all of them are hunters that move here, but they come here, they become friends with their neighbors who are hunters. Pretty soon they want to try it. So the number of applicants goes up every year. So we're never going to get ahead of point creep. But
I agree, but I think we should add tags. And I also don't think, I mean, let's keep in mind, and I know we see this across a lot of our RACs, like, oh, that unit isn't in my region, so I don't want to comment it. If it was that, then we should have region-specific management plans, right? Not statewide. So
I'll second your motion.
all right, there we go. That's what I needed. Now, don't get it may not pass, but thanks, right?
second we have a motion on the table by Cash to increase an additional 6 permits. A second was coerced out of Charles. Do we have any comment on the motion? All right, let's call for a vote. Charles?
Yes.
Scoot?
No.
Tyler?
No.
Cash?
Yes.
Darren?
Sure.
Anna?
Yes.
Brad?
No.
And Steve?
No.
4-4. I am going to vote no. I with the big increase in the previous years, I'm skeptical to go overboard. So. Okay, now we'll move to agenda item 8, the Pronghorn Permit Recommendation.
You don't have a motion on that one. We haven't. So all you did.
Oh, that was just the one.
Yeah, that was just the one. We're not done there.
Remember, I tried to go small. But we don't have on the rest of the recommendations.
So this is a good time for me to put in a plug because there's going to be some RAC positions open on our RAC. So anybody listening out there, and my position's one of them, thank goodness. So if anybody has a desire to come up here and feel like you're having a little bit of input, please talk to, if you want to be there'll be a sportsman's rep, an at-large, and there's a nomination thing. But if you go to the division website, there's some information there that you can get to be able to apply for the open positions. All right, now let's entertain more motions for that agenda item.
I'll make a motion to accept the elk permit recommendations as presented.
Okay. We have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Any questions on the motion? Okay, let's vote. Charles?
Yes.
Scoot?
Yes.
Tyler?
Yes.
Cash?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
And Steve?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. Now can we go to agenda item 8? I've tried twice, so. All right. Buck pronghorn or pronghorn permit recommendations. Any clarifications, Dax?
Nope, I think we can just jump right in.
Any questions from the RAC?
Can you talk to me a little bit about the splits for Parker Mountain for the buck permits?
Yeah, so a little history there. Several years back, we got to a point on the Parker where I think a combination of heavy harvest and heavy hunting pressure really changed the distribution, the numbers and distribution of pronghorn on that unit, and ended up with, a lot of folks that had frustrating hunting experiences. We changed the boundaries. We made some tweaks. Well, the population's come back, and we counted the objective from the air this spring. When you factor in siteability, and then we've got a lot of we're anticipating reasonable production. We've got to harvest a substantial number of animals to manage to the objective there. The buck-to-doe ratio is high on the Parker. I think it's 53 or 55 bucks per 100 does. So we're in the mid 50s. So we need to harvest a substantial number of bucks and a substantial number of does. Because of that previous experience where we had, heavy hunting pressure and heavy harvest and had, kind of unfavorable changes to animal distribution, we're recommending, instead of a 20-20-60 permit split, 20 archery, 20 muzzleloader, 60 rifle, like we do for deer, we're recommending a 30-30-40, 30 archery, 30 muzzleloader, 40 deer. And the rationale behind that is just to try to spread that pressure out a little bit more over time so we don't have so many rifle hunters.
I didn't know if she's talked to you. She talked about.
Steve, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I'm good.
Yeah, so that's the only unit where we're proposing a different split than the standard 20-20-60.
I have some questions about it. You had a pretty good presentation. Sounds like Pronghorn are doing pretty well, at least the way you presented it. I know, I can't remember what year it was, but we did some moving of some Pronghorn. Can you kind of elaborate what units we needed to move Pronghorn to, where they came from, and how that unit's doing?
Yeah, so we moved this last winter. We trapped and transplanted 300 Pronghorn off Parker Mountain. I'd have to look to remember the exact numbers of how many we put where. We put a big chunk of those up on the Cache Rich unit up there on the Wyoming border, kind of Bear Lake area, where they'd had a really bad winter kill that winter, 22-23. We actually lost a lot of Pronghorn there, along with, what they saw in Western Wyoming, Southern Wyoming, Southwestern Wyoming. So, that was one of the big places we moved Pronghorn to. We also moved Pronghorn to some other units in the state that had been, the populations had been down due to drought. The Dutton-Ponsegont unit, the Southwest Desert unit, and we brought some to this Southeastern region as well. To help me remember, guys, what units did we bring them to? South Centerville Desert. How many did we bring? 66. So we did see pretty high initial mortality after the capture with that transplant, which is a little concerning to us. Maybe it was a little too hot when we did the capture. Maybe we had to run them a little too far from the helicopter. But we're looking at that. We're evaluating that. We do have a long history of transplanting Pronghorn off Parker Mountain. It's a really productive herd, and we have successfully moved Pronghorn from Parker Mountain to other parts of the state, and they've contributed to those populations, even helped us start populations in a few areas, or reestablish populations in a few areas. I don't think trap and transplant is off the table, but we're maybe hitting the brakes a little bit after kind of some disappointing observed mortality after the capture this last winter.
Okay, and then I guess I don't have the notes right in front of me, but those units that you moved the Pronghorn to, are you increasing tags on those units? How are they reflective of past when you had to move animals there? You just said it wasn't that successful. So are we increasing tags there, or are we just kind of holding tight?
So we set our permit numbers. We have an average harvest age objective for Pronghorn of, to try to harvest between 2 and 3 year old bucks for a limited Entry buck Pronghorn hunting. On some of those units where we moved Pronghorn to, I think, let me pull it up. We're not having like aggressive increases on any of those units. Let me pull up the Cache Rich. I'm trying to remember what we did there. We're going from 9 permits to 10 permits on the Cache Rich. And I think these other units that we're supplementing, well, the reason we're supplementing them is because they're struggling a little bit. So I think very minimal increases, if any.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure and get that on the record that we're not aggressively going after Pronghorn units that we just captured and released into.
Dax, was the high mortality rate, that was kind of an anomaly, wasn't it? I mean, it higher, like you said, you transplanted antelope for years off successfully. This was an unusually high mortality rate.
So we put a larger sample size of collars out this year than we've ever done before. We put 260 something collars out. And so I hope it's an anomaly, but I know from past years between ear tags or sightability collars, we've seen those animals and pretty good numbers of those animals on the transplant units for years and years after the transplant. So I hope it is an anomaly, but we haven't ever had this level of, looked at it with this level of scrutiny with 260 GPS
Could
collars.
just be better data.
Yeah.
Okay. Wasn't too many years ago that we'd cut tags. I mean, the ability for that herd to grow as big as it has in just a couple of years is amazing.
Yeah.
Whether it's growth or just movement.
And we got into a rough spot there, and part of it was there was a lot of concern from, other multiple use folks that also use public lands where these pronghorn hang out. And we did have, a couple years in a row where the board actually significantly increased the doe permits that we had recommended. It was a combination of harvest, and not all of that harvest was at the levels the division had recommended, but some of it was additional harvest that, that came about through other means. And it's been a tricky one, and we are a little sensitive to that and concerned about it. We're committed to managing to the objective, and we don't want to repeat past mistakes either.
Yeah, I remember, and this is more for the Antlerless, but I remember not too many years ago, right in the middle of the Antlerless hunt, there was calls, they shut the hunt down because all of a sudden there was no antelope on the unit. So we definitely don't want to go that route again.
Oh, we're kind of between a rock and a hard place here, trying to figure out how to manage the objective and hopefully trying to avoid some of the tough situations we've faced in the past.
So I got some questions on the antelope just because I'm not that familiar with them, but they mostly twin, correct? And then they're natural predators because of their speed are just not that successful, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think we still see some pronghorn, especially fawns, taken by coyotes and that type of thing. But yeah, once they get mature and they're able to move quick, they do pretty well. They have great eyesight. They do tend to spend a lot more time in open country where they're less likely to be killed by ambush predators. We do see on Parker Mountain more pronghorn spending more time in areas with more trees. In those areas, they are more likely to be susceptible to ambush predators. But predation doesn't seem to be the driving factor with our pronghorn herds. It seems to be precipitation more so.
So with high twinning and then low predator numbers, I can see their numbers fluctuating pretty substantially.
Yeah,
Like
pronghorns, we have good conditions. They can be really, really productive. And Parker's maybe one of the exceptions in the state of Utah. Probably some of that stuff that's up close to the Wyoming border mirrors the patterns you see in Wyoming, that high desert stuff. And then Parker has all of those probably great characteristics of that high desert stuff, but is probably not quite as susceptible to winter kill like we might see in Wyoming, in those units adjacent to Wyoming. So most of our pronghorn units in Utah, most of the, like all the West Desert type units and those, and these San Rafael Desert, and they're probably more affected by drought, I would say, than necessarily winter kill. But yeah.
Any other questions from the RAC? Any questions from the audience? I know we did have one online comment regarding this agenda item.
So yeah, this one you actually had two people. One strongly agreed and one strongly disagreed. Their concern was about the number of archery permits in relation to water holes. Too many people hunting over water holes causing some issues there.
Okay, thanks. We don't have any public comment cards, so we will go to RAC discussion. No discussion, will entertain a motion.
Well, I guess I'll make a motion to accept the recommendations as proposed by the division for pronghorn.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll
on the
second
table.
that.
Steve,
Yeah, I'll second it.
you seconded that motion. So any discussion on the motion? Okay. Charles?
Yes.
Scoot?
Yes.
Tyler?
Yes.
Cash?
Yes.
Darren?
Sure.
Anna?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Scoot? Sorry, Steve?
Yes.
Many S's. All right. That motion passes unanimous. And that brings us to agenda item number 9, the Antlerless permit recommendations.
Last one from me tonight. So appreciate all the thoughts and comments and discussion. Antlerless, don't really have any updates or clarifications. Happy to answer any questions.
Charles?
I have a question about it. In the past, and we changed this as part of the RAC when this changed, but if you had a antlered tag, you could take the antlerless animal during the same season you were hunting your antlered tag. With a lot of these units being above objective with elk, is that something we're considering bringing back to give that opportunity to have higher success rate on some of those units?
So you're talking about how it used to be if you had you had a cow elk permit, for example,
Yes.
and it overlapped season with a bull elk permit or a buck deer permit. Yeah, so that's something we changed in the elk plan to allow us to maybe be more surgical or strategic with antlerless pressure and antlerless harvest. There's pros and cons to it. I know personally as a hunter, I actually loved having the option to take a cow during the spike hunt if I had a cow tag for the same area later or something, but it is something that I think as part of that elk plan committee and going through that, I think it's a sacrifice we decided we wanted to try to implement to give us the ability to be a little bit more surgical with how we hunted antlerless animals. So, and I haven't had any discussion since the implementation, haven't had any discussion about bringing it back. That might be something that comes up in the mid-plan review when we sit down and look at the elk plan again next summer.
I liked it too. I'd like it to be part of the mid-plan discussion.
Yeah, if you have a question?
I do. I got a couple, but I'll just take a turn. So on Chalk Creek, East Canyon, Morgan, I don't really see any difference in tag recommendations, but I still feel like we're way over objective. So what are we doing about that?
As you know, elk are really good at finding places where they don't get shot at. And if you have units that have large tracts of private land with landowners that don't want to harvest a lot of elk, you will really stack elk into those areas. There's some tools we have to try to get elk harvest on private lands. I know you're fond of the CWMU program, and we'll talk about that a little more later. It's a hard one, and it's a challenge to get the harvest we need on some of those units that are really stacked with private lands where the landowners aren't necessarily really interested in harvesting a lot of elk. And at some point on some of those units, like Morgan South Ridge, for example, you've got the Hennifer Echo WMA. We can only harvest so many elk on the Hennifer Echo WMA with public hunters before you hit a point of diminishing returns pretty quickly. And so sometimes it's kind of like banging your head into a brick wall to try to get the antlerless harvest you need on some of those units.
So I think, and you can correct me on that, I think I even saw though that we didn't even increase and I guess we don't, I mean, do we do private land only tags up there or are we doing antlers control? Or are we doing both?
I think both on some of those units, and the private lands only permits are set at a level where the idea is that they don't sell out. If they were selling out, we'd increase the number. We recommend an increase.
Any other questions regarding the antlerless permits?
I'll keep firing away if no one else has one. Okay. I noticed that we didn't do any decrease on the book list. That one is in our region. Can you help me understand that, or one of our biologists understand that a little bit more? We're not decreasing permits on the book list for antlers.
Yeah, so the book list elk population is below the objective, and we've observed signs of resource limitation in the book cliffs, especially on the summer range. We've observed on the Book Cliffs lower cow elk pregnancy rates than we've seen anywhere else in the state. We've seen an elk population that's really heavy towards older age class animals. And so even though we're below the age objective, we've kept antlerless permits and antlerless harvest pretty constant on that unit. It's one where at some point we may need to have some conversations about if the objective is appropriate for the unit based on what we're observing in animal condition and reproductive status.
So is that keeping the permits high? Is that in an effort to kill off more of those older cows that are not being productive, or what's behind that?
Yeah, where we're seeing resource limitation, it's to maybe alleviate some of the pressure on the resource by having fewer mouths on the landscape. And if you have disproportionately more older age class animals in your population, you're going to harvest more older age class animals. You'll harvest some younger animals too. It's hard to distinguish. But yeah, that's part of it.
So, and then I feel like the anthro is another unit where we maybe could have gone up, but we didn't. What are our thoughts on that one?
So anthro is one, and I probably would need to talk to the biologist specifically on that one, but it's a unit where I think we're kind of up against that point of diminishing returns. It seems like you can add more permits. It doesn't seem like you harvest very many more elk. Anthro can be a little tricky with migration and timing. It's a wintering population objective, so we do the counts and count animals in the winter. And depending on the year, depending on the winter, I do think we see a lot of elk, and we have some collar data to support this. We have elk that come across from the Avinaquin unit across Highway 191 that come over onto Anthro from the Avinaquin. And so if you have a really mild, light winter, that's usually when we don't fly. We might not be at objective. When we have the kind of winters where we have good snow conditions to go fly, we go count and we're over objective. And sometimes we'll have hunters that are frustrated because during the hunting seasons, they're not seeing the elk numbers that we're seeing there when we count later. In the past, we've had some hunts, I can't remember if we still do, where you could hunt both sides of 191. You could hunt the Avinaquin side and the Anthro side. Those are a little messy to try to calculate harvest data, and when you have separate objectives, it's a little bit complicated. Elk don't always read the guidebook and know exactly where the boundaries are and where they're supposed to go, and sometimes depending on the year, unlike deer that are pretty faithful to where they go summer and winter, elk sometimes they'll just pack up and do something different, throw you a curveball.
Thank you. And then my last one, sorry everyone, my last one. But then on the Wasatch unit, which I know is really 3, but we didn't really increase permits there either. Can you speak to that a little?
And the Wasatch is one where we did add a few more hunts and a few more permits on the Wasatch West. We have quite a few of the private lands only permits on the Wasatch East. And depending on the year, if we have a harder winter, we do get quite a bit more harvest on those private lands permits. If those elk start pushing further towards Duchesne, they start pushing further east. If we have a mild winter, they'll stay on that Starvation Bench and Rabbit Gulch and Tabby WMAs, and we don't get as much harvest. So we've added some additional permits. An archery cow hunt there the last couple of years. We didn't get a lot of harvest on that. We are above objective, and I think that's one where you're probably gonna see recommendations to increase antlerless harvest there coming up this year. Not huge increases. That's probably a fair one to call us out on.
Any other questions?
Yeah, this one's just, you mentioned that due to resource limitations, at some point, DWR might look at changing the objective. Can you just remind me, can that be done within the elk plan, or what the process is?
It would, to change objectives, we have unit plans that fall under the umbrella of the statewide plan, and our population objectives are set in the unit plans. So the way the plan is written, if it's just the division updating general information, we can just do that to the plan. But if we're going to change hunt boundaries or population objectives, then we need to form a unit committee and go through a more formal process, and then take that through the RAC and get approval from the board.
Brad?
I just out of curiosity, when he mentioned the Wasatch, wasn't there a study a couple of years ago about a migration into the Tinnick area with that elk?
To the Tindick from the Wasatch? No, I don't
Maybe
think
I
so.
must be confused then, yeah.
Yeah, oh, we did have a,
Didn't you start a new hunt or a new area boundary out in the Tinnick area somewhere?
so we did
But
for
that-
the West Desert Unit Complex, we did redraw some of the boundaries and shuffle around
But
the
that
objectives a
wasn't
little bit.
due to the Wasatch.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't related to the Wasatch.
Any more questions from the RAC? Any questions from the audience? Online summary?
On this one, you don't have anyone online. None at all.
Sweet. We do have a public comment card. Jared Hanson.
Yeah, I'm Jaron Hansen. I'm representing the Utah Farm Bureau. Yeah, we just first of all, I just wanted to say thank you for the DWR for working with our local farmers and ranchers, and we've gotten a lot of compliments over the last year that the DWR is doing a lot better. We feel working with our producers. So we feel that staying under the objective is important during times of drought, and so we just therefore support the division's antlerless permit recommendations. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll open up for RAC discussion.
I've sat up here and talked about the book list till I was blue in the face. Like you've all heard it, but I'm glad to see where they're going with this. I've witnessed it myself on the book cliffs. There's been multiple studies on aspen regen in the book cliffs. Aspen's not doing well. The summer range for elk is not well up there. A lot of mouths to feed. I think re-looking at that objective is a benefit. A lot of work has been done recently in the book cliffs to try and improve summer habitat, but it's not going to bring the elk numbers to the objective, I think, that we have for them.
Any other discussion? If not, we'll open it up for motion.
I'll make a motion to accept as presented.
Okay, we have a motion on the table by Charles. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Darren. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, Charles?
I made the motion, so yes.
Scoot?
Yes.
Tyler?
Yes.
Cash?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
And Steve?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. Okay. Is everybody good to keep going through, or do we need to take a 7-minute break?
I'd be up for a 7-minute break or even a 5-minute break.
All right, let's take a 5 to 7 minute break, and we'll come back and muddle through the last ones. All right, welcome back, everybody. I think that was a much needed break for some of us. So, okay, agenda item number 10, our CWMU Antlerless Permit Recommendations. Chad?
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. So maybe let's just go on to questions. Oh, I have a question or two. Yeah, but it looks like Eric does on this on Antlerless.
Well, I want to confirm something here because on the agenda, it was the CWMU rule listed. This just says Antlerless Permit Recommendations.
I think that's always what it was. There's a next one that says landowner permit rule though.
No, when I looked at it today, when we were talking,
We might have missed that. It should be Antlerless permit recommendations. Yeah, we did the rule last year, so we don't have any rule recommendations at this time.
Okay, that's kind of what I was wondering. So, all right. Well, with that, any questions from the RAC?
Yeah, I got one. So, Chad, I mean, I saw that Deseret picked up a lot of tags, and I'm super appreciative of that. And I believe they're doing 2 cows, or they're letting everyone off. They're giving everyone the option. You can have a second cow permit or something like that. So, yeah, it seems like Deseret is doing some heavy lifting for our elk up there, which is great. I mean, talk to me though about the other CWMUs on Chalk Creek, East Canyon, Morgan, South Rich. I felt like when I went through the recommendations, other than Deseret, I didn't see a whole lot of increase in antlerless permits.
Yeah, and those are conversations that we're going to have later on with that new rule that we did change last year. It asks us in certain scenarios, and this being one of them, to bring those in and have conversations. We didn't have time with the data to get that done before this RAC meeting. So we'll do that in May or June. We'll bring those in and have those discussions with the CWMU Advisory Committee. And yeah, we do feel a little bit comfortable just that even though Deseret is carrying the load on antlerless harvest, they also carry the load of elk. So like if we were to pick one area where we needed to get the harvest, it would be on Deseret. So now we feel like we're making a lot of progress on that unit just with that. With the 2 cow tags, we did get a lot more harvest out of CWMUs than what we had in the past. So I feel like that's probably going to be an effective tool for us going forward.
I guess another question I have for you it's kind of related to this because we're talking about permit recommendations and people getting to apply. There was some commitment from the division last year, especially when we talked about the CWM rule, that the hunt planner would get an opportunity to get really updated and have good information in there about the hunts and the tags available. And how have those efforts gone to keep the hunt planner up to date with our CWMU units?
Yeah, I think that's still a work in progress as well. Like I know that the CWMUs are working on a web page for all that information to be so a little bit easier for them to update it rather than having to kind of take us out of the middle of it, right? So yeah, they're working on that end. We're making progress on it. It's probably not where we'd want it to be right now, but we're getting that direction.
Any other questions, Chad?
Well, I have a little bit on the hunt planner. It's not necessarily related to CWMUs, but it could be. Currently, just because we're in application season, it would be real nice if that hunt planner had some draw result odds on them, so people could look at that and determine what their odds are. This year, I really looked into CWMUs, and it's difficult to find because you've got to go through the spreadsheet that's put up for the past few years and control F and try and find your stuff. It'd be nice to just have that data available for us. And I know that Eric's probably not going to like that because it means more people are going to see where he's putting in for tags. But
no, I just I don't know if that's practical. I mean, you get an app, it can only handle so much. I mean, there's data available. You just got to go to the website. There's all kinds of Go Hunt, different apps out there that you can get all those odds on.
You can, but you got to pay for those, and this is free data being produced by a government organization.
Lindy, you have your hand raised. You have something you'd like to share with us?
I would if you get a second. We actually are revamping the draw odds method. So we are creating one, and hopefully will be out later this year, where it is an interactive. It's not just a PDF spreadsheet that you're talking about. So we are working on something like that right now with our new draw contractor.
Hey, that was quick.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindy. Any more questions for Chad regarding antlerless or CWMU antlerless permits? Any questions from the audience? And we do not have any comment cards. Do we have a online? Okay, nothing online either. Any discussion from the RAC?
I just have one comment. Chad, I know you're not the tech person for wildlife and doing the hunt planner, but again, how our public, easiest way for them to figure out where can I apply, how many permits are being offered, what are the season dates, who do I contact if I need to contact someone for season dates, is the hunt planner. And so I think it's really important that the general public have access to a good data set that gets them the information they need to be able to make decisions. You know, I was thrilled when the hunt planner came out originally, thrilled. And I think the CWMU part of it, where you go down and you get information about the unit, who to contact, some of their ranch rules and things like that, it's invaluable. And so whether the division takes that on, which is where I really think it should be, or the CWMU association, either way, it needs to be clear how to access that and have the most up-to-date information. And Lindy, I hope you'll keep putting out the PDFs, because some of us wait on the edge of our seat for PDFs to come out every year so that we can do some analysis.
So Chad, I think he's got a great point. But whether that goes to I think maybe at the very least, maybe we look at a link. If the CWMU is going to get their website, there ought to be at least a link on the division site that can direct people to that.
Yeah.
Or on the hunt planner that would direct them to that. So
Yeah, that's the plan, and some of them already do have that in the hunt planner. There's a link that you can click that will take them over. So that's the direction we're going. And really, it is a cooperative thing between us and the CWMUs of trying to get that up and going. So,
okay, thanks. Any other discussion?
I guess we're kind of off topic here, talking about the hunt planner.
Well, let's stay on topic.
Yeah,
we got a long
maybe
night.
I'll just let you guys do your thing here.
Entertain motion.
Move to accept the approval as is.
Okay, we have motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I can second that.
Okay, motion by Scoot to accept as presented, seconded by Dana. Any discussion on the motion? Let's vote. Charles?
Yes.
Scoot?
Yes.
Tyler?
Yes.
Cash?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
And Steve?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. All right, Chad, next item is landowner permit rule.
yeah, maybe I'll just give a brief update on that. This is kind of in response to House Bill 202. A lot of that was legislated that we're not able to change, but part of that was we created a criteria for landowners between 4,000 and 9,000 acres, that they can have the ability to get vouchers. We were asked to put criteria in there of what we would weigh, whether they got 0, 1, or 2 vouchers. And so that's what this presentation is. It just goes over the criteria that we're going to look at as the division on how to grant those vouchers.
Okay, thanks, Chad. Any questions from the RAC?
Yeah, I have one, Chad. Can you help us understand a little bit the difference between how the 5% allocation for limited entry units for landowners, what the difference was? Because we approved that all last year. We talked about, did a new program for them. What the difference between that was and House Bill 202 and its 5% quota. Can you help us understand the subtleties a little bit there between them?
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff that we did last year was kind of adopted, right? So it's 5% of the limited entry tags. Now, however, they get split, like above 4,000 acres gets half, below 4,000 acres get the other half. They don't go back and forth between those two pools. So that's one of the major differences. Another difference is last year they weren't able to make any money off of those tags. Now they're vouchers that they can redeem for the season of their choice, and they can sell it if they want, they can give it away, they can do whatever they want on that. So that's probably the major differences is the vouchers. I might be missing one thing. We talked earlier, that's pretty much what we talked about, right? Okay.
And I was a little unclear. That 5%, is that an additional, that's coming out of the public draw, right? Or
No,
is that an additional 5% tags?
Yeah, and I've heard others speak on this on other drawings, but yes, it's additional and they're always accounted for, right? Like if there's additional tags up there, potential is that it lowers the age objective, and then in a future year we cut tags, public tags, because we harvested more than what we decided with just our public draw, if that makes sense. So they are additive, but eventually it's.
So initially it doesn't affect the public draw, but over time it very well could and probably will.
Yeah.
Okay.
God, I hate to put this one on you, and I saw that Dax decided to slip out, but does the division have any concerns with all the additional quotas we do? And I'm not just picking on this particular one we're talking right now, but I mean, we do a lot of additional quotas, right? I think our next action item is to talk about additional quota. And then we do additional quota for youth on the archery. And now we're doing additional quota for limited entry, and we do additional quota for general season. And I mean, we make a management plan, right? We follow that plan, we make recommendations, and then we do a lot of additional quota on top of it. What are our thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we try to take that into account, like try to do that responsibly. I'd say specifically on this one, it's legislated, so this one specifically is kind of out of our hands. So not a lot we can do on that, but I mean, generally speaking, yeah, we try to take that into account and try to make the proper balances when we do those things.
Any other questions for Chad? Any questions from the audience? Do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes. This one, we have one individual that somewhat agrees.
Okay, we do not have any public comment cards, so we'll open it up for this RAC discussion and motions.
Is this I guess the action item that you had put some numbers together, Cash?
I had, and I don't want to take too much time to go through all those. I just wanted the RAC to have that information, so it might help with the discussion. So I don't want to hide anything from the public. I worked with the division to just put together some numbers on our landowner permit programs that we have. We do currently have 6 of them, and this new legislation created a 7th. And so I just wanted you guys to have those. I think my comment on this item, realizing fully that there's been legislation that's been passed, we can't really talk about that. There's nothing we can do about it. But I think for me, something that I appreciate about the landowner permit program rule, which is what we're talking about, is they do go in there and they list some objectives of the program and say, hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish with this rule. And one of those is to increase private land owner tolerance of big game on their private lands. I would actually, if I could, stand up and applaud the division, because I think in my lifetime, so in 30 years, the division has dramatically changed tolerance for big game animals on private land. I think you guys have crushed that objective right out of the park. I mean, so much so that we have private landowner groups interested in making sure that their landowner program is in code. It's no longer subject to public input or a program run by wildlife, it's in code. And also, I think we've gotten to see that there's enough tolerance for wildlife. Like, we'll have private landowners go to the legislature and say, I want a new program so that I have exclusive access to permits. That's, you guys have done so well on that objective. And I think public has benefited from that. But there's also other parts of that rule where it says that we're supposed to increase and secure public hunting access on participating landowners' private lands. I don't know that we've done that one as well. Of the 6 programs, now to be 7, there's only 2 that require any public access to hunting on private land. Only 2. So something that I think the RAC should discuss tonight and consider, I'll probably end up making a motion for, and I don't know where it'll go, but I would like to suggest to the Wildlife Board, and especially to the division, that they consider what are other things that we can do to help level the playing field a little bit between the private landowner opportunities and the public's. And one thing I think we can certainly have a conversation about is points. There were 650 people last year that got a general season deer tag through the landowner program who also applied in the public draw. And so they built a point. We took that away from the public our last time we had RACs. We said, dedicated hunters, you either do general season or dedicated hunter, but you don't do both, right? And there were 905 people that hunted a limited entry or once in a lifetime species last year. So they had that coveted tag, right? The one we were talking about that takes forever. You're maybe only going to get once in your life. There were 905 people that either hunted a once in a lifetime or limited entry species last year that also built a point in the draw for a once in a lifetime or limited entry species. As a member of the public, I don't get to do that. I have to pick the limited entry species I apply for, and that's the one I'm stuck on until I get it. Same thing with once in a lifetime. But there's a certain group of people that can do both. I think if there is a concept out there that you either get a tag or you build a point, but you don't get both, I think that should be applied across the board. So again, I understand, can't do anything about this law that was passed. I think I really appreciate the division coming up with some criteria that can guide them as they issue the voucher program. But if this RAC were to do something tonight that's meaningful, I think it should be to recommend to the board that if you draw a tag for a specific species and permit type, you lose your points. And that you also, for the 2 landowner programs that are an actual draw, you have to pick the draw that you're going to be in. So if you want to do the landowner limited entry bull elk draw, go ahead. But you don't get to do that one and come over and do the public limited entry elk draw, or the pronghorn, or the deer for that matter, right? You pick your limited entry hunt, and if you draw a limited entry tag for a certain species, you lose your points. And I think the board, we can, and again, we don't get to make that decision, but I think we can recommend it to the board and they should take it into consideration as something that should be added to this recommendation of an alteration to the landowner permit rule. So that's my thoughts.
I don't want to take from your whole point there, but I did see, he said we can't discuss it because it was a legislative action. I think we do need to discuss some legislative actions here. I feel like, as of recently, there's been a lot more legislative actions due to wildlife than I've seen in the past 4 years that I've served on this RAC. And I don't know if that necessarily means that, we're not doing our job, or there's some other pulls being put on legislatures or on representatives, people getting to their ear to go around the system that's been created here, which I believe is a good system. We get input from the public, we get valid discussion that goes on about wildlife, and we move it up from region to region, then up to the board to discuss. And I feel like with one of those rules, we're losing some people on this RAC, just due to not having a hunting license, which doesn't make much sense when we want non-consumptive members to be on our RACs, and then requiring them to enter into a consumptive capacity seems to be a ridiculous thing to do. Sounds like you start talking into an echo chamber when you do that. I think that we need to at least the legislature needs to figure out if they want this process to continue, or they want to start doing ballot box biology, because we've seen how that works in other states, and it doesn't seem to work out pro for the hunter, pro for the public, really.
Yeah, it's not a good trend that we're seeing, but the way around that is make sure you know who you're voting for. So.
Oh, I do, and I write them
vote.
all the time.
So. Any other discussion on the agenda item? Okay, we'll open it up for motions.
I'm going to go ahead and take a swing. I'm just going to focus on the one thing. So I'd like to make a motion that we recommend to the Wildlife Board that they add some line items into this landowner permit program rule that state that if you draw a permit for a specific species and license permit type, you lose your points for that species and permit type. And also, you're only allowed to apply for one of the draws for a species and permit type. So that would be my recommendation.
So let me try and get a clarification. Lindy, help us out here, because I believe if you draw for limited entry, if you draw and you have to choose, you can't put in for the Henrys and for a limit or a CWMU buck permit, right? You have to choose. And if you draw a CWMU limited entry permit, you do lose your points. Am I correct, Lindy?
So if you draw, yes, but in the LOA, landowner stuff, no.
Yeah, if you purchase it, you don't lose it.
No.
But if you draw it, you lose your points.
Yeah, but if you put in and don't draw, you'll build a point.
Correct. So they still can apply in the application. The problem is with it is these are vouchers, and they don't know if they're going to obtain a voucher probably during the big game application. And we don't know who it is until that voucher is redeemed. And that could be in September.
So let me ask a question. If they redeem a voucher, if they have put in and got a point for that year, if they purchase one of those vouchers, can they go back and forfeit their points?
Can I take away a point? Yeah. Yeah, like if that was in the rule, then yeah, we could go back and invalidate that application.
So that's what your motion needs to be, is that if they purchase because if they draw it, they lose their points anyway. So if they purchase a CWMU voucher, that they would either lose their points or the point for that year, however you want to state that.
Yeah. I think though what's also important, right, is that there is 2 draws. So there's some that you can just purchase.
Mhm.
There are also draws in the landowner program too. So you have to go through the draw to see if you're going to get it. So what I'm trying to be a little broad to say that if you get a limited entry elk tag, whether you purchase it, draw it, your points are gone, right?
Okay.
If you get a general season tag, whether you purchase it, draw it, your points are gone. And I don't care what draw you get it in.
Clear on that motion?
So just make sure we capture it.
Yep.
Recommend the wildlife board to add line items stating if a permit is drawn for a specific species or permit type, you lose your points.
You
How
probably
about-
need to add drawn or purchased.
Purchased. Yep, I agree. I accept that. Drawn or purchased. Yep.
Okay.
Oh, but Lindy
Lindy.
has a correction for us.
No, what about waiting periods? Just throwing that out there.
Oh, Lindy, I'm happy to tack on a waiting period. Would
I'm
you
just-
like it? No, I'm not gonna get into waiting periods. If you want to circumvent that, I'm more interested in you losing points.
Can we tack on waiting periods?
Yeah, oh, there you go. Do you want to tack on? Do I have a
wanna-
second? Are you gonna second, Charles?
I'll
If you're gonna
second.
second, then
Yeah,
yeah,
I'll
we'll tack on waiting periods. And you incur a waiting period. Let's add that.
Yeah, I think if they're gonna have a permit, they just will have a waiting period, because if they draw the permit, they,
Yeah, thank you,
So,
Lindy. Thank
okay.
you, Charles. Yeah, let's incur a waiting
All
period
right.
too.
all right, so we have a motion.
I know this is landowner, but can we say one permit for non-residents too, instead of all the permits they can put in for right now?
What do you
We'll
mean?
let the wildlife board.
We'll let the
sort that
wildlife
out.
board. I'm gonna
Okay.
stick with where we're at.
Okay, I won't add too much.
Okay,
Yeah, let's not muddy the waters now.
I'm looking for a second though.
Oh, I will second.
Okay,
Second that.
motion made by Cash, seconded by Charles.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
So these are landowner vouchers, not necessarily CWMU tags, right? So are these new landowner vouchers, is that a draw process, or they're the landowner's vouchers to do with what they will, right? Keep or sell to a buddy, or
Yeah, there's some that they can draw, they can put in for a landowner draw and draw them. And then some of them we just give them, but they are vouchers. So, yeah.
so for the landowner to get the voucher, they have a landowner draw. I think Colorado has something similar where they put in and then if they've got enough property in that unit, they can get some of those vouchers and then they can sell them to folks or probably keep them themselves.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these smaller landowners with smaller tracts of land probably keep those tags for themselves rather than sell them, but I don't know that. That's.
And are they private land only, unit wide?
Yeah,
Depends on the
Okay.
program.
Sorry,
Only on their private land. It's not all private lands. It's just the ones that are part of their application.
So it definitely depends on what program we're talking about, right? That's why we have that's why the division, not me, the division has a nice table. Depending on the program, you've got a unit-wide tag or their land-only tag. Some are drawn, some are vouchers. There's a whole series of qualifications for each one. But my main point is whatever program we use, if you get a permit, you lose your points and you incur a waiting period. And I don't know if this got lost, but I was also going to say, and I think Lindy's what corrected us on this, but my big thing is like, I don't understand how you can put in for a landowner limited entry bull elk draw and in the same season be putting in for a public limited entry bull elk draw. So my motion originally was to get rid of that as well. You got to pick one. You either do the landowner draw or you do the public draw, but you don't do both. So that's also part of this motion.
In a lot of ways though, and when you look at the different hunts that are available, there's a lot of disparity in the quality of the hunts. So some of these landowners might have access to, a limited entry tag, let's say, that's not super high quality, but they have access to that, but they would like to continue putting in for maybe a higher quality hunt.
Dude, I'd love to put in for the general season deer and the dedicated.
Right, but the thing, because you started out by praising how much landowner tolerance has been created, right? And I see this kind of going in the opposite direction. And I don't necessarily know how this increases the public access onto private property, because it may make it to where people choose not to use those landowner tags.
And I'm okay with that. I'm sticking with my motion. I got a second. I appreciate your point, Scoot. And I think this is maybe why the wildlife board went against it the last time we made this recommendation. They said, hey, I don't really think this captures what we're doing. But again, I come back to this. The tolerance for wildlife is so much that we'll have a whole group go and make sure it's codified in law and that they have ongoing access to permits no matter what. That's a pretty high tolerance. So whatever this might take away from that a little bit, I'm not too worried about it because it sounds like we have a high tolerance. I also got to witness the CWMUs fight tooth and nail for everything they've been given. And we get to see the LOAs fight tooth and nail for everything they've been given. So I come back to, it seems there's a really high tolerance, and I am grateful for that. So the question needs to be, how else can we level the playing field between the private opportunity and the public? And I think this would help with that. And if the RAC disagrees with me, that's okay. Let's take a vote and see. And the wildlife, the wildlife board might definitely disagree with me, right?
That's why we have discussion on the motion. So.
Yeah.
Josh, you wanted to add? Okay, so let me read it to you just to make sure we're clear. Recommend to the Wildlife Board to add line items stating if a permit is drawn for a specific species or permit type drawn or purchased, you lose your points and the waiting period is incurred. And you have to pick one draw to apply for permit type. One draw to apply for permit type. Permit type. Okay.
I think you need to rework your first sentence just a little bit there.
How do you want it?
So I think almost we need to strike out the first part, and then the second part sounded like what Eric said, which was pretty good. So read the first sentence again.
So the first sentence, recommend to the Wildlife Board to add line items stating if a permit is drawn for a specific.
Well, right there, drawn or purchased.
Drawn or purchased.
Yep.
Dana said given, drawn, purchased.
Given, Dana.
Well, so this is my question. It might be semantics, but so if I'm happen to be good friends with somebody and they just give me the tag, do I still get to keep all my points because I didn't buy it?
I think something that
Or
Lindsay helped me
gifted.
point out is there's a difference between a voucher and a permit. And you notice that on the spreadsheet here. A lot of people got vouchers, but they did not redeem them to turn it into a permit. Right? So that's the key. Did you get to hunt this year or are you building points? Which is it? So go ahead.
So stating if a permit is drawn or purchased.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of this.
Yep. Sorry, this is a crafty one. Bear with me.
Drawn or purchased for a specific species, you lose your points, right?
Specific species and permit type.
For specific species or permit type, okay.
And
we'll
it should
delete
say
this.
and permit type, right? Specific species and permit type.
For a specific species and permit type, you lose your points.
And incur a waiting period.
Okay, let me delete this, permit type. You lose your points and the waiting period is incurred.
Yep.
And you have to pick one draw to apply for
Yeah.
per permit type.
How about this? The applicant must also pick one.
Okay, the applicant.
Because there's a lot of ands. in
There's
that.
a lot of ands. The applicant
There's a lot of mud. Yep.
It's an English lesson.
must select one draw to apply for per permit type. Does that work?
Yep.
Okay.
Read it out loud. Okay, board. And you can decide if you still honor your second here.
I know what you're trying to do here. The only thing I see by permit type, when we say permit type, are we saying species? Are we saying limited entry? We
So
saying
permit-
landowner use as a permit type?
Permit type is general season, limited entry, right? Landowner, that type of thing.
So would you if you put in for a landowner permit, would that still be the permit type as a limited entry? Are you,
We could ask Lindy on the semantics, but my understanding is that when you get your voucher, you're issued a limited entry bull elk tag as your
yeah,
voucher.
but the thing you put in for was a landowner permit, not a limited entry permit.
Here you go. Here's Lindy.
They're still considered limited entry permits within our system. Just it's a type like the landowner, but it is still considered limited entry. So.
And I think that's the way the rule reads as well.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I want to make sure the brush is painted in the right direction.
Oh, thank you.
So the only issue here is that usually it's an LLC that puts in for these draws for landowners. So it's not an actual person because they get vouchers when they put in for the draws. They're not getting an actual permit through the draw process for these landowner LOA permits. It's a voucher. And then they give that voucher to an individual. So to prohibit them from, like, if they can't do both, it's a little hard because it's usually an LLC. It's not an individual.
So Lindy, do you feel like what you're saying is don't focus so much on what draws that they're putting in for, but instead just focus on whether they got a permit?
Correct. Yeah, focus more on if whoever obtains one of these type of permits, regardless of the method of obtaining it, they're the ones that get the points and waiting period taken away.
Okay, we can take out the draw part.
So get rid of, recommend to the wildlife board to add line items stating if a permit is obtained
That'd be probably better. Yeah.
for a specific species
Specific species and
Okay.
permit type, yep.
and permit type. Okay, I can make that change. Is obtained. Okay, so the whole thing. Recommend to the wildlife board to add line item stating if a permit is obtained for a specific species and permit type, you lose your points and the waiting period is incurred.
Period. I think that's where we want to end it right there.
Then end right there?
Charles?
Yeah, that's good with me.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. We stirred the waters enough.
Thank you for your patience.
All right, so we have a motion on the table. It has been seconded by Charles. Any discussion? All right, let's call for a vote. Charles?
Yes.
Scoot?
No.
Tyler?
No.
Cash?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
And Steve?
No.
Motion passes 5-3. All right.
Now we got actually what Chad came here to talk about. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, let's go back here to the landowner permit rule. And let's entertain motions. Because we all want to hear Colby's spill next.
I'll make a motion to approve the rest of that. Or that, yeah, because his was added on top of it. So
Okay,
the landowner permit rule as presented.
all right. I have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Tyler, seconded by Darren. Any discussion on the motion? Vote. Charles?
No.
Scoots?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Steve?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-2. Huh? Do you guys want to elaborate why you were?
I just object to all this legislative change. Although I do know that's the job of the legislature, I'd like to put it in that I'm not for it. And the fact that we have to muddy the waters at this level to figure that out really shows how much more difficult that makes it.
Related to that, is there any way a RAC board or somebody or we could make a recommendation or a resolution to kind of inhibit that overreach in a way? Is there any way to do that?
No, because ultimately the legislature has the authority to govern the wildlife board. The legislature gives the wildlife board the authority to do what they do. They could take that away in a heartbeat.
I understand that, but
So there's,
is there, this feeling needs to be known somehow. I guess that's between
Make
us
sure
and our
you vote.
legislature. It's
make
not-
sure you
not
vote and
from
know who
this.
you're voting
The-
for. That's,
So Eric, if I just to speak to my no vote, I appreciate what the division did. I know we could only vote on the criteria tonight, but again, my stomach just churns over House Bill 202, so I just couldn't vote for it.
okay. Noted. All right. Our last action item. We saved the best for last. Toby, the Expo rule amendment.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief, but a couple of just quick clarifications. One, the Expo permit rule is something that is, it's 200 permits that we can give to a contractor. Right now, MDF and SFW have the contract, but those 200 permits are written to give to an Expo in Utah. And so I just want to clarify that it's not necessarily part of the Western Hunting and Conservation Expo. It could change, and the way that it works is it goes out for request for proposals. The contract is good for 5 years and it's renewable once. And the reason why you're seeing the rule and these recommended changes today is because that request for proposals will go back out this spring. It'll go back out this spring. And then this new rule that we're proposing, or these changes that we're proposing, will take effect in 2027 when there's a new contractor that has those permits. Another really quick thing, the Expo has done a lot of good things for wildlife in our state. I love the fact that, yes, it's 200 permits that are set aside, but it's 200 permits that are set aside for anybody to apply for. Anybody can go to the Expo, anybody can apply for those permits. It's relatively inexpensive, and it's another drawing that happens in our state that gives folks a chance to dream and hope and sometimes draw a really cool permit. So it's a really good thing, and the money goes to a lot of good things. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, questions from the RAC?
Well, can you help me understand? So one of the changes that was coming through was to make it really clear that the Expo permits were an additional quota, not to come from the, do I have that right? Or
I mean, so kind of. I mean, we keep talking about additional quotas. All it means that we have to keep more is that we have to keep track of more things on the front end instead of the back end. So one of the big frustrations with Expo permits in the past has been that you hear Dax's presentation or Rusty's presentation, and they recommend 10 permits on a unit. But then 2 of those permits were already drawn at the Expo. And so before those permits go to the other draw contractor, they are removed. I'm talking like Dax now with my hands. And only 8 permits go to the draw contractor instead of all 10. And so when the draw odds report comes out and people are looking through the PDF and they say, well, wait, 10 were approved. Why did only 8 go? And it's because 2 of those were Expo. Now with conservation permits and other permits, we account for those on the front end instead of on the back end. And we're recommending to do that same thing because right now, I feel like even though they're accounted for, it feels like it burns public trust because they say, hey, you said 10, you sent 8, why? Well, here's why, but it is confusing.
so to build off that and going off what Lindy said, so are you guys suggesting that you're going to alter the draw odds report slightly to reflect that, hey, there's some permits over here for the Expo, permits that were for the unit, or any thoughts on that?
So it will actually make the draw odds report align with what is presented here is what it will do. They'll align 100% now, whereas before they align with what happened, but there's a discrepancy in numbers sometimes because we deducted Expo permits as per rule.
So as I remember, you talked a little bit about how there in this new contract, there'll be the ability to do some online stuff if things.
Yeah. So yes. So we took out the COVID-19 exception because we don't have a current COVID-19 pandemic. But what we realized is that there could be some unforeseen consequences, and whoever has the contract, instead of going in and having an emergency rule change, we put a caveat in the rule that says that, hey, if there is something big enough that the division, the contractor, and the wildlife board agree to approve to have a virtual expo, we can do that. Now, I don't think any of us want that, because having the expo be an in-person event really favors Utah residents. And the year that it was virtual, you saw that it's a different, it just opens that pool, right? Not that that's bad, but these are Utah permits, and we're okay with them being Utah permits and having to apply here. We have another drawing where you can apply from anywhere in the nation or anywhere in the world. So,
Okay, and then currently under the contract with SFW and MDF, it's held in Salt Lake City. I guess this is a rule change, but has there been any discussion to move it to some other bigger cities that might be in Utah? I think St. George would be a good place, especially with their new, with stuff with PGA. I mean, they're really up and coming. It would get people to move to different parts of the Utah and spread that wealth around a little bit.
yeah, I don't think that is something that we're evaluating in the 200 permit rule. That would be evaluated in the contract proposal.
Blandings, Joe, we could try that.
Can I jump on that, what Scoot just said? No, in all seriousness, I get what you say about it being a Utah, it benefits Utah people, but part of that is, people spend big money for those tags, and people that don't have money get to throw a few bucks in and kind of try and join the lottery. But when you live in Southeast Utah and you have people that have to drive, not everybody can do it. Not everybody can spend that money. And I understand the benefit for Utah people, but there is a group of people that just can't do that. And that's why I would love to see somehow an opportunity for people to be able to apply, even if they're not there. I get the reasoning. It's nice to have people there and they spend a lot of money, but there is quite a few folks that just can't do it.
I concur with that, Steve. It'd be nice if there's an opportunity just for Utah residents to do an online version of that and not have to actually go up to the expo.
Is that something that could even legally be done, offered to Utah residents and not anyone else? I don't know if that's.
We can worry about the legal stuff later. I mean, so like the RAC gets to make recommendations to the board, and if between now and then there's something that we need to look into and say, hey, great idea, great motion, but it's not legal. I don't know that we're worried about getting it all right tonight. I understand the sentiment. I just would say that a lot of life is about choices and give and take, and how much a priority is something is to you. And yeah, I get that it's a sacrifice and it's an additional opportunity. It's not a required thing. So I get the sentiment behind having it in Utah and having it in person.
I think one of the choices here is if we make to have a choice to let Utah residents apply online for that, we would have more money coming into the expo because more people would throw that $5 in via their computer than drive all the way to the expo and spend $300 on a hotel room to throw that $5 down.
Maybe just a handful of tags. I think I could get behind something like that. Maybe not all of them, but have a side pot of tags for just Utahns.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to it, because you open it up to more people, your odds are already terrible and your odds go down. So, there's pros and cons. I mean, I get what Steve's saying. There's some guys that can't go up there. They live a long ways away. But, you know, I think about when I was younger and living from paycheck to paycheck. And if I wanted to apply for the hunts, you found a way to do it. You know, you scrimped, you saved all year. So you had money to, back then you actually had to put in a lot of money, not just the fee, but you find a way to do it. And so I like the way it is, because I think it forces people to go there. They spend money there. I think that benefits Utah more having those people there than the few extra people that would put in for the $5 tags. So just my 2 cents worth.
I guess I would just comment, if the idea to open it up electronically for Utah residents to get more money, let's open it up to everybody. Get more money.
But we don't want it for everybody, Dana. We want it for Utah residents.
All right. See, this is where
want it.
we're standing, I think, with it.
Yep.
I think it's
We want to hunt deer, bigger deer every year, and not have anybody else out there. That's right.
That's exactly what we all want.
Yeah. So, all right. Any other questions for Kobe? Any questions from the audience? Any online comments?
No, none on this one.
Okay, we do have a couple of comment cards.
Just kidding, I lied. You have one online this time, we agreed.
He was a very agreeable person,
Yes.
he or she. All right, start with Troy Justison and then Jeremy Anderson after Troy.
I'll try not to, John. Troy Justison, Sports Fish and Wildlife. Been sitting here really trying to think of some nice things to say about Kobe, similar to what John said about Rusty, and man, I'm just at a loss, so I'm sorry. So no, it brought back a lot of memories when I heard that fence talking about an Alton. I actually was guiding down there on the Heaton Ranch when that was there, and kind of the standing joke was Alton was the first gated community in Garfield County because of that fence. So yeah, but no, we, as is stated, we've had the contract for the last 10 years. Truly grateful for the opportunity to host. You know, we put on the expo and then also host these tags. I personally really believe they are a huge benefit to the average Joe. And the interesting thing is, you debated back and forth that we'd raise more money if you didn't have to validate in person. That didn't show true when COVID it come about. Yes, it's incrementally increased every year, but even when that validate in person was taken away, we still raised more money having to come and validate. So it didn't necessarily hold true. But we support the recommendations by the division with the changes going forward in the new FRP that's going to come out. I know speaking for our organization on its own, the funds that we've generated from our portion of that, we spend a lot of money in species or divisions that don't necessarily have a lot of money that are allocated to them through the division's budgets, that being waterfowl and upland game. And where we're restricted and we can't use conservation permit money, these funds have been a huge benefit to the waterfowl and the upland game. And that's something that we've enjoyed to do. So we support this. Willing to answer any questions that people may have, but would like to thank you very much.
Thanks, Troy. Jeremy.
Jeremy Anderson, Mule Deer Foundation. I thought of one for Covey. He's from Emery County. There we go.
No, he's from Sanpete County.
He speaks well, too well for Sanpete. Mule Deer Foundation definitely supports the division's recommendations here. Troy mentioned some things about these unrestricted funds. What I'm excited about with those things, we just did this a couple weeks ago at the Watershed Restoration Initiative. Biologist come and pitches us a project, and I'm able to say, hey, we're going to fund part of that for $40,000, take that out of our $1.50 or our $3.50, which is changing in this plan, but it's getting much cleaner to understand for everybody. So, you know, in that SFW MDF, we funded over $4.7 million, and a good deal of that's that $1.50, $3.50 money. You know, part of that's Cinnamon Creek property that we did, you know, a couple of years ago, which is flourishing. And so these monies are going to great things in Utah, and they're staying right here in Utah. So I want to thank you guys for the chance to talk about it. So thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Okay, we'll bring it back to discussion from the RAC. No discussion, we'll entertain motions.
This probably is going to die, but I'm going to make a motion to suggest to the board to open up those tags to Utah residents via online.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Steve seconded it. All right. Any discussion on the motion? Let's vote. Charles?
Yes.
Scoot?
No, because I like the road trip with my homies.
Tyler?
I don't think all of them should be open online to Utahns, but so I'm gonna go no on your motion.
Cash?
No.
Aaron?
No.
Hannah?
No.
Brad?
No.
Steve?
You gotta remind me the motion. My mind's going 100 different directions.
I gotta ask, maybe you changed your mind.
I'm just, of course, yes.
Okay, that motion fails.
Thanks,
6-2.
Steve.
Any more motions?
I don't know if I want to make a motion or a comment, but that idea about rotating this expo to a few other locations may not be a bad idea. I don't know if I could make it a motion necessarily.
Well,
but-
it's not part of the agenda. That would be
Okay.
part of the contract deal that they would do. So, yeah.
Well, I think we had a good discussion. So I'll say, can we accept the division's recommendations as proposed?
Okay, have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Motion to accept as presented, seconded by Tyler. Any discussion? Charles?
Yes.
Scoot?
Yes.
Tyler?
Yes.
Cash?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Steve?
No.
Steve, do you want to clarify why you?
Oh, I think we kind of talk out both sides of our mouth, to be honest. I think we say, you know, this is for the common folk to have a chance, but maybe it's for the common folk that can afford to travel up and spend the money, you know. I would just love to open up to everybody that possibly could, and I guess I'm just trying to defend my little neighbor that would love to do it, but will never be able to, is not going to drive up to Salt Lake and spend $300 on a hotel. He's just not going to do it. So I just wish we could open it up to all Utah residents to apply online. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, thanks.
We tried that, Steve. We tried it. Maybe it'll get some motion. We started the waves.
All right, that's the last of our action items. We did have a informational item, the Lower San Rafael. Colton, huh?
Upper Center.
Upper San Rafael. I've been up and down all night, so. Colton, you have anything you'd like to just
Yeah, so we do a revision of our habitat management plans per our WMAs on a 10-year cycle. And so it's just reached that 10-year cycle. This is the new revision for the Upper Santa Fe Habitat Management Plan.
Okay, any questions for Colton?
I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on the livestock grazing management you mentioned. You mentioned working with SITLA. Just kind of curious, fence maintenance, would you work with BLM?
Yeah, so with that, we're implementing a high intensity, low duration grazing plan. It'll be 50 AUMs for 30 days. The permittee will be also helping maintain the fence, as well as helping remove trespass livestock that come on the WMA. So,
Would grazing be authorized every year or just based off of wildlife habitat objectives?
as for now, the plan is every year. He'll be grazing that, and we're hoping that'll help reduce. We've had issues with trespass livestock in the past. We've also constructed or replaced a fence along the southwest border. And so we're helping between these two things will help reduce livestock trespass issues.
What do you have in there for invasive species removal, specifically tamarisk and Russian olive down there?
So we are planning on removing a bunch of tamarisk for sure. We do want to remove Russian olive as well. We're hoping to conduct some native shrub plantings along the riparian area to replace some of the habitat that the Russian olive is providing for many different species, including upland game. So that's not a specific date, but that's in the near future. Hopefully remove some of that out there.
Do you guys plan to use dedicated hunters to help you with some of these projects that you have out on the WMA?
That's something we could definitely look into. I think we like using dedicated hunters anywhere we can. So that'd be a great opportunity to use dedicated hunters.
So in that plan, if you're planning to graze every year, do you have, in your presentation, you mentioned working with SITLA. What would happen? I guess I'm just concerned. Have you worked with that local BLM office and just to ensure that permittees and livestock cattle are managed appropriately?
Yes. Could I kick that to
Okay.
TJ? He might
I'll kick that
know a
to-
little bit more.
Yes, I believe we have. I believe the BLM helped us with that fence, helped us purchase the materials on that fence. Currently, we are excluding the BLM properties for when they're grazing as part of the allotment. If we need to coordinate with BLM in the future, we can do whatever we need to make sure everyone's okay with the decisions that are made down there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I know there's a good working relationship between DWR and BLM. It's just something that I think is good to remember.
I agree.
Any other questions or comments?
I just want to make a comment. I just want to compliment that place. I've been there goofing off a little, and it's got so much potential. I'm so glad the division has that property, and I'm just excited about its potential. It's pretty awesome.
Okay. No other comments? Thanks, Colton. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
It is great to see that work happening. Well, that concludes everything we have on our agenda. So we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
I'm pretty sure it's all in favor. So good. Thanks, everybody. Good night.